What's happening, everybody? Welcome. Welcome to the lab. I'm your host, Joshua Diaz. Good to see you guys. Welcome in. We have one of our favorites, Dr. Gary Brucato, author of The New Evil, where you can pick it up at any local bookstore or on Amazon. Also, he is part of the Cold Case Foundation and a forensic psychologist. He's not allowed to diagnose himself, or else who knows what he'd have, right? I mean, they say you got to be honest with yourself. You ever run into that conundrum?
Of wanting to diagnose somebody. But
yeah. Have you ever looked in the mirror? Like, have you ever just been like shaving one day and you're looking in the mirror and you're like, I think you're borderline something.
You mean, do I self-diagnose?
Yeah.
Looking in the mirror? Oh, I mean, I'm sure that I've done that many times, but you know, but I don't feel like, you know, dealing with the HMO, you know, to
you don't want to bill it
process, you know, so I don't deal with it. But yeah, no, I'm actually pretty open about you know, pretty frank with myself. I think it's important to be, you know, about anything.
I'm frank with myself too, but I don't diagnose.
Well, so this is my new background, a little more doctorly, you know, with the bookshelf and the couch and my various plants in the background and things. I raise Sarracenia. Do you know what those are?
No.
Sarracenia are a kind of carnivorous plant that looks like a trumpet, and when an insect touches the top and slips in, it gets devoured by the essentially the enzymes that are in the plant, but they happen to be extremely beautiful. And pitcher plants, they're called. So I raise them. I have tons of them all along my windowsill and everything. But
I can see
they're really beautiful.
Succulent back there.
That's a you see a cactus, and you probably see you see my Venus flytraps. I have loads of them.
So is that what it
like carnivorous plants?
Is that what a Venus flytrap? That's what it's called, right?
Well, that's the
I know what that is. Whatever you said it was, I have no idea what that is.
Oh, pitcher plant. Yeah. No, I'm very big with plants. I think they're beautiful, but of course, being a true crime guy, it shouldn't shock you that I like carnivorous plants, predatory plants. Essentially, they're very interesting to me. But I won't feed it anything, because I told you I don't like to kill things. So it has to catch it naturally, or it basically just gets fed nutrients, and that's the end of it. Nutrients, water.
Yeah, like I said, I know what a Venus flytrap is, but I don't know what the trumpet thing, whatever you said.
It's another kind of carnivorous plants. They're fascinating, you know, ever since, you know, when Darwin found them, he was fascinated by carnivorous plants. They are really weird because they are plants that really do feel like they have a life to them. You know what I mean? They're really strange, and of course, I'm drawn to anything that's a little bit off the beaten path. So,
do you ever get scared that like one of them will evolve and eventually eat you? Because that could happen.
No, but that's an interesting fantasy. If you'd like to lay down here on the couch,
well, I'm just saying, like, I mean, that could happen. I've seen movies where, like, the Blob.
Parents, Josh, you want to lay down here and we can talk.
It looks comfy, but no, I'd rather stand. Do you ever have? That's another thing. Like, if would a patient be able to stand if they wanted to?
I think patients do everything. Pace. You know, I've had patients that have to do really, you know, they need the room like something arranged differently. You know, I need to sit turned because it makes me uncomfortable to look at you. You know what I mean? You have to accommodate people to make them comfortable, you know? So, let's see.
Anything exciting that you want to promote, plug, anything like that? And let me.
Well, I was just on. I was on Court TV tonight,
Yeah.
talking about what's his name, Brian Coe. It was a very disturbing case. That's a 19-year-old diagnosed with a mixture of autism and depression, and you know that people on the autism spectrum are rarely dangerous, virtually
Yeah.
never.
Right.
But because he has, it is speculated, psychopathic qualities in addition to that kind of autistic detachment, it made him kind of a scary guy. They used to call him Jeffrey Dahmer in school and everything. And he decided to kill a homeless man just to see what it feels like. And he gouged out his eyes, took his innards out, kept his head and his hands in a closet discovered by the parents. It's pretty disturbing stuff. And I think that case may get kind of hot because there are these interesting recordings of him in the interrogation room, just kind of boasting, drawing on the wall, getting down on his knees and sort of acting out the stabbing. It's really interesting stuff.
When
Disturbing in that way
when
that
did that happen?
when you're detached, in addition to, being callous and whatever, you can just think of people like, microbes in a petri dish or a frog pinned to a board. So you don't really feel much about dissecting the person. And I think it's about wanting to feel alive because of that deadness that you have. And so there's that. And Chris McDonough and I on the interview room, we did a pre-record, which is going to air tomorrow. You can live chat while watching the pre-record. But we interviewed my good friend, the living legend Vernon Gayberth, who Vernon Gayberth. I mean, what can you say about him? He wrote the very first article ever on profiling. He was, I think, in charge of homicide for the Bronx in New York, and I think he worked 8,000 homicides. He'd been consulted on some of the most important cases of the past, 30, 40 years. And he literally wrote the book on sexual homicide. He helped to define the features of it, wrote one of the most important textbooks on the subject, etc. He trained all the detectives, all the cops. Chris, for example, considers him a mentor, a major teacher.
Right.
And so we interviewed him, really, really great interview. And I think people will find that
And
fascinating.
that's on
Hard
the
to
internet.
get him on, because he's so busy. And so, but we did. And
And that's on the
I
interview
think
room?
he kind of, what happened? Yeah, interview room. Yeah, he wrote a review for the New Evil that's on the cover. And if you look at his page, his homicide consultation page, it's one of the only books he recommends for research material. Like, he thinks it's a very important book, The New Evil, and very proud of that. And if people realize who Vernon is, they would understand why that's such a kind of gobsmacking, thing to
Right.
me to have him appreciate me like that. And he is also just joined the Cold Case Foundation, so he'll also be consulting with us on cases. So we're really honored. So that's pretty cool.
It is cool.
And but I'm excited to be here. We're going to do the call in, right?
Yeah, we're
Are
gonna take
people going
some
to
calls
be okay?
and,
And
it
let's
works.
see who's here. Anybody here that I recognize? I like to see who's watching. Let's see.
Who's watching? Alright, let me see. The number is 817-799. Let me see. We'll take a look. Let's take a gander here. Caller, go ahead. You're on the air. I think we're off to a
Ouija
roaring
board.
start.
The Ouija board again. Are you with us, spirit? Rap 3 times if you are with us.
Hello.
Why are you not at rest? Let's see.
Are you there, caller? Caller, are you there?
Hmm.
Let's see
Hello
for
to
some.
you. Somebody's saying hello to me.
I don't think
Hello.
they're not saying anything.
Looks like Texas lady saying hi. And Kelsey, hello. Let's take a look. Mhm.
Mhm.
Sherry, the podcast was a pre-record with Vernon and Chris and myself, and that will air tomorrow.
I always wonder why these don't start out so good, but I really couldn't. I really couldn't tell you, even if I wanted to.
Gee's Creative Hand Crochet. Look at that. Look at all that cool stuff she's got. Don't you love all those colors?
Where?
People who can do things like that amaze me. That D has behind her. I mean, just imagine taking all those threads and being able to make them into something that you picture in your brain, you know? I always thought that was a very interesting metaphor for life because life looks like the underside of a tapestry with all those weird random threads that don't make any sense. And then only when you like flip it and you see it from the other side do you see the picture. You know what I mean? That's
Right.
kind of how I think life is. I think when we all get to heaven, I guess the other side, it'll all
I
make
like that
sense.
song. You always
I'm
you have
sure
a
it doesn't here.
you have metaphor. You're a metaphor kind of guy.
Well, it's goes with the territory.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't hear anybody on
I think
the.
that's cool. I have a thing for people who can do things like that. It amazes me. I'm definitely that kind of guy. Aren't you? Don't you like creative people?
Mm, depends what they create.
Well, that's true. That's a good point. I mean, people can also create lies, right?
Well, I
Like the
mean,
old saying,
I don't like people that
yeah,
create like wakes in a no wake zone and stuff like that.
yeah, like the old saying that typhus, the disease typhus and swans were made by the same god.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
a
that
fact.
people can create different things. But I don't know. I think it's a kind of exciting trait, and it's a don't you think it's sort of it's kind of sexy when people can create things. You ever see somebody like, I don't know, sit down and play a cello or like, get up on
Um,
stage and they just look like an ordinary person and then this like
yeah,
angelic
but I
voice
know it.
comes out of them and they have the whole room spellbound or don't you love that?
I mean, yeah, but I don't. I think that's more like fascination. Like I don't find somebody playing the cello sexy.
Really? Making music come out of that thing?
Do
Like
you
the
find
idea that they could bring out the feeling in it, you don't think it's an attractive thing? Definitely. Or
not
a
the
person that
cello?
can look at a canvas and paint something in such a way that
Yeah,
you
well,
could feel what they're feeling about something through the
that
canvas. That's
that I
remarkable.
be able to understand a little bit. But
What do you mean?
well, I'm just saying, like the cello is probably the least sexy instrument you could play.
Are you kidding? Have you ever seen Jacqueline Dupre play the cello?
I'm sure
You
he's wonderful.
nestle it. You have to sit down and nestle it like a human being between
Guy,
your thighs, and you have to play the cello, with a kind of a slow, beautiful
look. I'm not
artistic
saying that
quality. I don't know.
it's
I cannot even imagine somebody not understanding how a cello is a sexy instrument. That's funny. Come on. You know it is. You're just busting my
I'm not. I've never once said. I, I think that the cello is a fantastic stringed instrument. It's beautiful, but
and it's so sad. It's such a sad instrument. Did you ever hear the sound it makes?
yes, yeah, I was in band. The people that played
It's kind of
cello, I didn't.
lonely. It's a kind of lonely instrument. It cries out, it's
Yeah,
beautiful.
it cries out, "Don't take my milk money." Those are the kids that play.
No, 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 no.
No,
When
those are the kids
somebody plays
that
the
play. No, no,
cello,
those
you
are the
can
kids that
feel
play
their
cello.
feelings. Whatever. You're just trying to be funny. Come on.
No, I'm not.
Alright, okay. Alright.
I don't
This
think
is
so.
where we defer. What can I tell you? I have different things that I find interesting about people, but I think that creativity is beautiful because it's a slightly masked way of kind of being in touch with the unconscious, letting people know what's inside of yourself, in a way that transcends words. It's an interesting thing, and it's sort of timeless. You could look at an artwork in a museum and think, if this person were alive, I'd be in love with them because the what's coming out of them in this frame, is just unbelievable. It's just
Right.
strange. I don't know, I think about the weird things. What
I'm
can I
not
tell you?
saying that the cello is not a. People say it's a beautiful instrument. Yeah, I'm just saying I don't equate it with like being sexy.
Is
That's
there
it.
an instrument you think is sexy?
No.
And please don't say like the jaw harp or the,
Yeah.
you know, the kazoo. I mean, do you have a
I
do you have
it's
an
funny
ins
you say that because I have a friend, his name is Lucas, who plays the kazoo. We call him Kazookas, and, he's really good at it. He plays Maria Maria by, uh, what's that guy's name? Santana. Plays that one a lot.
on
On the
on the
harp.
kazoo?
On the kazoo, yeah. He goes, "Burr, burr, 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 burr." He's really good at it.
You could actually take a kazoo, it's very interesting. You could attach a kazoo to a trumpet and put the trumpet to your mouth and kind of pretend that you're playing the trumpet, and the air passing through it will make the kazoo sound. Well, actually, you connect the kazoo to the trumpet, and it sort of makes the sound louder of the kazoo coming out of the front of the trumpet. It's very interesting.
For some reason, I am
Caroline has a Stradivarius?
what's that?
Seriously? What'd you do, knock over a bank? How
What's
do
a
you have a
Stradivarius?
Stradivarius?
I don't even know what that is.
Stradivarius are like these historical, unbelievably crafted violins, like worth literally millions of dollars.
Really?
Yes. Like we
Can you
know where everyone is in the world. Like
could you play
they're
one?
like on the radar of the yeah, they're masterpieces.
Alright, hold on, I'm gonna try
Is
it.
that true? Caroline, do you really have a Stradivarius? That's unbelievable.
Have you seen one be
Hmm.
like, have you played one before?
I've touched one, you know, I've seen one, but I never, yeah.
Strat
I actually was just about to go see a concert with a woman who owns Mendelssohn's violin, like literally the Mendelssohn, you know, like as in the Wedding March, Mendelssohn, you know,
Yeah.
the famous one. Anyway, but anyway, do you like classical music, Josh, or opera or anything like that?
No.
Have you ever gone to see that kind of music live?
Not by choice, but I have, yeah.
You should. It's very consciousness changing, especially choral music when you go see it live. You feel kind of like you're in another world. The If the architecture of the building has good acoustic, like there are good sonics in the
Yeah.
building, it's kind of like you feel almost like you're leaving yourself. It's very strange. There's something about the harmony of all these people's voices or playing instruments together, and you're just sort of swept up in it. It's very addictive. You should give it a chance.
No,
What
I
was
mean, like,
what was
I've
that? What was what was
it
that
was
sound?
I was just testing something, but for some reason, I don't know
Oh,
why.
it's horrifying. It sounds like a seal in heat.
Well, it
All
was
right,
close.
should we, so should we jump into another call? I think the spirit has left us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm, doing what I can. I don't think I don't know, man. Might have to
I
restart.
love that there are people that think these things that I say are funny. This cracks me up.
Yeah, and
I
the
say
thing
this
is,
like
like,
random.
you're not even trying to be funny.
That's what makes it funny.
Yeah, that's what you're unintentionally, but sometimes I think you're intentionally funny too, because I do think that you are
Sometimes,
funny,
sometimes.
but for the
Well, I
most,
mean, you know, I told you my brother is a comedian, right? I mean, you know, and I come from funny people. It's just that I think the secret of being funny is the structure of seriousness. The contrast between seriousness and what's coming out of your mouth is hilarious. That's why Young Frankenstein is the funniest Mel Brooks movie because it's so serious looking that the lines become ridiculous. It's black and white. It's got a serious looking set. There's a monster, but everything that comes out of their mouth is hilarious, right? Because it's so structured.
yeah, but I don't consider you a monster.
I hope not. I hope not. I mean, you know, I mean, I suppose
That's not what you okay, I
one
got
could
you.
argue. I mean, one could argue that, but I hope not.
No, I don't think I think
Thank you for calling
can
Okay,
you
so
hear
Call2
that?
let's have
Host
somebody
of
call us. It would be
I'm
nice
trying to
enter
hear
your
because
that.
I
show
feel like
Can
we
you
have
hear
to
that?
wait
press
for
pound.
something. Hmm?
Could you hear that?
I don't hear anybody calling.
That's because they haven't yet. I don't think.
Oh, Seth Rogers Sebastian's dad is with us, and
You did not enter
he
a
likes
number.
big bands and
Goodbye.
classical. See,
He what?
he likes big bands music and classical music. He says,
I don't think so.
good for him. That's what he says. Good for him.
Well, he probably does, but I'm saying like I could say, yeah, that's what I like, but I don't know, man. Like everybody says, Beethoven this, Beethoven that. I'm like, I don't know. I'm sure he's fantastic, but
You're sure Beethoven is fantastic?
no, that's the thing is I'm not sure. I don't know. I know that people say that he is. I don't know that he is.
Give him a chance. I think you would like Beethoven. He's pretty fascinating. I mean, it's not all equal, right? I mean, he was in the interesting thing about Beethoven is that he fell right smack in the center of different periods of classical music. So you get like truly classical music and truly romantic music out of the same brain. And then you add the fact that he was like deteriorating in terms of his ability to hear and having to like press his ear to the piano and hear the vibrations and couldn't hear when he was, listening to his own music performed is fascinating. And then you have the fact that he kind of lost his mind. I mean, at the end, I mean, he wouldn't even get up from the piano. He would urinate in a chamber pot rather than stop composing. He was like sort of manic and frenzied. And the interesting thing about him also is
Well,
that
now that I know that
you
he
didn't get an
yearned,
autograph from him. You didn't get an autograph from him or most of the classical musicians at that period. If you what you would get is hair. That's what when we say somebody's a long hair when they're a
yeah,
musician. I think it's they used to grow the hair out because they had to give so many of the clips to fans. And as a consequence of that, there was hair of Beethoven that could be tested genetically recently, and they were able to figure out all these interesting things that might have explained why he went deaf. And it was kind of cool. But anyway, I love Beethoven. I mean, he's like in the world of classical music, he's like I don't know, he's like the top top tier as far as I'm concerned. But I'm gonna send you something, Josh. Would you promise me you'll listen to it if I send it?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I'll watch. I'll watch it.
I'm gonna send you a CD if that's okay.
Of course it is. I'm
Sound
I'm
good?
trying to set this back up one more time.
You promise I'm gonna send.
You mean
Debussy is my favorite.
you
Somebody
want me to
just mentioned
promise
they
I'm
like
gonna
Debussy.
Thank you
Debussy
for
is my
calling
favorite. I have
home
a huge picture of him on
and
the
call
wall.
screener line. Please enter your show
We have a
or
call.
meeting number and press pound.
Not yet, but hopefully soon.
Enter your 6-digit PIN number.
Thank you for calling. Your call is very important to us. Please hang on the line for the next available lead. Do you know one time, Josh, I had to call the FBI, and when you call, they have a movie phone like decision tree, and it literally goes like this. If you're calling about a bomb threat, press 1. If you're calling about a murder, press 2.
Thank
If
you
you're
for
calling
calling
about child abduction, press 3. Like
call
literally,
screener
it's
line.
exactly like that.
Please enter your
If you're
show
calling
or
about an
meeting
internet crime,
press
press 4. It's
They
hysterical.
have like a child abduction
That
button.
was an invalid number.
They have buttons for
Please
everything
re-enter
that
your
you could
show or
report.
meeting number,
It's
followed by
really
the pound
funny.
key.
It's funny because it sounds like movie phone. That's another example of something that's funny unintentionally because it's so
Enter your
structured and
6-digit
serious
PIN
that
number.
it yeah,
7.
so
Sorry,
funny.
this is been a pain in the butt.
I agree with you, Fibber.
You are now in the host room and can manage
Can
your
you hear
callers
that?
from the
McGee and
calling
Molly.
studio
Yeah.
web interface.
Gary, can you hear that?
I hear the
movie phone?
the movie phone guy. Yeah, I hear that.
All right, let's try here. Hopefully this works.
Or was it Kramer? That's funny.
It was Kramer. Caller, go ahead. You're on the air.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi.
Caller, go ahead. You're on the air.
Hi. This is SHL, Michigan.
Hello. Hi.
Hello.
Is your background on?
SHL. Hello. This is. Hello.
Hi.
No. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Hold on. I'll turn it up a little bit.
Oh, no.
All right, go ahead. This should be better now.
Hey.
Hello. How
All
are
right,
you?
I hope so. Hi, Josh. How's Dr. Brucato?
How's life in Michigan?
Hey. All right.
I like any state with a motto that's in Latin.
Oh man, we have this like horrible.
What's going on?
I don't know.
Would you hit the eject button?
Right.
There she is.
Yeah.
Would you hit the eject button?
Can you hear
No.
the feedback? Can you
guys,
hear? Can you hear
this
that?
lag is terrible.
That's what I'm saying. It's the worst. I don't know why it's doing that.
I can hear the feedback. You guys are like 5 seconds.
Okay. Well, you know, we're a few light years away, you know, for the call. We're on a satellite. Why don't you just state the question? Like we'll just sort of we'll let you be and just say what the question is, and we'll answer offline. Let me say what the question is. Wow.
Okay. I just wanted to publicly edify Josh and Dr. Brucato and Chris for all that you guys do.
Oh.
There are just so many of us that are just so grateful for all that you do. And I know that this takes effect in your personal life and your business life, but I just wanted to thank you and say God's blessings to you. And I just lift you up and ask the Lord to just bless you in your comings and your goings. And just bless your heart and your mind and your soul. And I just lift up all the people that are just seeking to find their children that are lost and hidden. And I just ask that you would just be blessing during this time when you are weak and suffering and tired and exhausted. We lift you up, thousands of us here. And we just thank you for all that you do and ask blessings upon your life. For the lab and for the interview room and for the Cole Foundation and for Gary's upcoming life that's about to pop on the internet. And we just ask your blessings and anointing upon that. And we just thank you for all that you have given up to serve the Lord in this way. And we give you praise and honor, glory, Jesus. We just ask that the desires of our hearts be filled and the parts that are inside that are hurting be mended. Your anointing be upon them individually and as a group. Bless the hearts of all the listeners that are aching from their own issues and their own trauma. Let your love be permeated in their soul. For Cecily's father that's online, I pray for him. For all the other people that are online, I pray for them. And I pray for you daily at Mass. And Dr. Gary, I sent you something in the mail that you got last Tuesday that has a beautiful CD in it with cellos. That's a wonderful contemplative music I want you to listen to that just will really edify you.
Oh, you're the one who sent me the package. You sent me the package in the mail with the CD.
And your devotion that you have given.
Yes, I got a package
yes,
with a CD in it and a copy of Helen Keller's autobiography. Yes, it was very beautiful, and the letter was very beautiful and very moving. I appreciated it enormously. Letter was very beautiful, very moving. Thank you. Really.
And
yes, that was a beautiful thing.
You guys daily. I'm retired now. And I'm retired now.
Yeah, but I'm gonna have to fix it. But I really, I mean, that was very, very kind, and hope you call back. I got to fix this really quick. So let me.
Well, I'll just say, if you're going to end the call, that the person who was calling sent me a package that had a very beautiful letter in it explaining that there are people out in the world that are hearing the things we're talking about and that we're having an effect on people without realizing it because they are identifying with some of what we're saying, or they're feeling that it's making sense out of things that they have gone through.
Right.
And so the person was very articulate in explaining that. I thought that was beautiful. And they included a CD of music that they thought I would find moving, and a copy of Helen Keller's autobiography, which I think was sort of symbolic in the context of the letter, and it meant a lot to me. You know, I like hearing from people. I
You
don't
have reached me.
not when I get calls at the office. That's a little complicated, but I
Is
do
that
like when people find me on IG, or they um, write to me or whatever, because I get to hear their personal story. Sometimes killers contact me who somehow see this or know about the work, and I get really, really interesting stuff. You know, people who want me to tell their story from jail. I got a letter the other day from an infamous mass shooter. I won't say who wanted to know if I would write about him and know the whole inside story of his case. I heard from a survivor of a mass shooting, which was very powerful. You know, things like that. So I love when people do that, and I do encourage it. But you can imagine when I receive mail from all over the place, the people who sort of open up the box there and have to distribute the mail are always amazed, because the mail that I get has markings from all over the world, or it'll say like it's from a penitentiary or whatever.
right?
But what can I say? You know, I'm drawn to people that live life, you know, kind of outside
I'm
the
gonna
realm of
text
the commonplace.
Gary.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I do. I'm very careful about people not being able to know where I really am. Right, but so let's see. But yes, it is a Pandora's box. I agree to receive contact from people. You never know. Josh, I told you the story about the person who sent me the
Can somebody
overcoat, right?
somebody test that number for me in the right there?
Okay.
No, no, yeah, you did tell me that. I believe.
People don't believe it, but that's a true story.
I believe it. Okay, let me see.
So let's see. My friend got a letter from Charles Manson years ago. Yeah, he was a chatter. If you wrote to him, you'd get an answer. It wouldn't make much sense, but you'd get letters from him. It's true. He
You
used to
talked.
like to sign Charles Manson. He used to
You've talked.
like to sign um, um, checks that had the Monopoly artwork on it. You know, that Charles Darrow Monopoly artwork, and he would sign it like it. You know, I mean, they were worthless checks, but they were checks with that cachet on them, and he would draw. It was very strange. Miss Marple, I have no idea. What can I say? Doing what you love for a living, you know, you lose track of the time. It's like love generally; it doesn't exist in time. You know.
Let's see. Caller, go ahead. You're on the air.
Hi, Josh. Hi, Dr. Gary. Oh,
Eureka.
I'm getting feedback now.
It's okay. Just say what the question
Um,
is, and we can answer on the other side.
okay, I've closed all my other tabs, so hopefully it will work. What I wanted to ask Dr. Gary is, did you see the Southport mass killer, the 18-year-old Abu Ruakabanda, who killed 3 children and hurt 11 others.
I'm sorry, I couldn't make out the name you're asking. Can you give me the name? What's the name?
Yeah.
Did anybody catch it in the audience? You could type it.
Wait. She's saying it.
Ruda Kabanda. Udakubana. Or you could Google Southport killer, Wikipedia.
You're talking about the Southport? You're talking about the Southport murderer?
Yes.
Axel Rudakabana?
Yes.
Am I understanding correctly?
Yes.
Yeah, a few days ago
Yes.
he was jailed for 52 years, right? Isn't that the one you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's an awful story. Yeah, they were children.
Yeah.
He killed a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 9-year-old at a Taylor Swift party, basically in Merseyside, right? Isn't that the case you're talking about?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a horrendous case.
Yes.
Horrendous case. Yeah. And
I was
what are your
wondering
thoughts on
if
it?
you studied it.
What are your thoughts on it?
I think the sentence was far too light. I think, I don't know. It's so heart wrenching. And I think it looks like he's going to be put in a mental health hospital. Like Ashworth, where Ian Brady was.
Well, the important thing to understand about that case, to me, as a mass murderer expert, what I would tell you is this. Now, first of all, he would only be considered, if he did this thing and it was 4 victims, everyone would consider him a mass murderer. I use the definition of 3 or more victims in the same place at the same time. So that would make him a mass murderer according to my definition. The important thing to understand is that he at least superficially was motivated by terrorism. He was in possession of Al Qaeda materials, and he was trying to make poison and all kinds of other things that really suggest that it was an act of terrorism. But you want to remember that one of the most important pieces of information to come out of the study that we did at Columbia was that using anything other than a gun is statistically more associated with being disturbed, like having serious mental illness.
Yeah.
And I think it's likely that this is somebody who was unwell. He was only 17 years old, if I remember. I tend to remember things pretty photographically, and I think he was 17.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, yeah, right. And so that there's this whole thing of like he was radicalized, but like you take a disturbed or potentially disturbed person whose identity is disintegrating, they don't know where they belong, the world doesn't make sense, whatever, and then they find something that gives them an anchor, a kind of a sense of purpose, a sense of identity. Now, normally, a mass murderer is triggered by the thing that gives them an identity falling apart, right? They're getting thrown out of the group. They're getting thrown out of school. They're losing their relationship, whatever. But what happens with some of those people is they gravitate to a political movement or a religion or something that can radicalize them and give a kind of phony scope to what they do, right? So, you think, for example, of what might have gone on with Luigi Mangione, the assassin, the CEO, the accused CEO assassin. well, superficially, the motivation is, to go out and kill someone that you think is, represents corporate greed and whatever. But what is it really about? Why the need, to go out and do that and get attention and be validated and, feel that you've come up against some force of evil and you've, taken it down in your mind and whatever. Usually there's a real reason, right? So that the idea is that the person wants to look like there's a cause to give it a respectability, in their own mind. But it's always at its heart an act of selfishness to take a life. And what happens if the motivation is narcissistic? Of course, the whole public falls in love with you and talks about how fabulous you are, because you get exactly what you wanted, right? Especially if you're an entitled person who's not used to
Mm.
anyone ever saying no to you. But this kid, the person who did this, was sort of invisible. This was an invisible person. And then you think about why would he target these little children at a Taylor Swift concert? Well, to radicalize people, Taylor Swift
Yeah.
represents so much of what they have a problem with. The liberated, powerful female, a force to be reckoned with, right? Who can express
Mm.
herself musically and can have anything she wants and doesn't need you,
Did you
right?
know her
They're
boyfriend played
threatened.
basketball?
I do indeed. That so I do know Kelsey, right? But
Mhm.
they have an issue with that kind of figure. And then you have the fact that these were children, right? Having fun. And you wonder,
Yeah.
maybe there was an envy there, an envy of that innocence and that happiness and being in a kind of family in a group. And I think for a lot of these kinds of people, envy figures into it at the heart. Superficially, yeah, it was
Yeah.
about a cause, Al Qaeda, whatever. But I think in the heart of it, it's the same kind of drama that plays out with a lot of people. Not having stable objects, loneliness, anger, loss, and not having any coping skills for dealing with it. You know what I'm saying? So I really appreciate your drawing attention to that case. It's very heartbreaking. Literally, it was a child killing children, right?
It is.
A teenager killing children. I mean, just think about that.
Yeah.
What is wrong with our culture, right? Remember when childhood was like,
Yeah.
thing? Well, those days are over.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. And maybe we can take the next call,
Thank
Josh.
you.
Thank you very much. That meant a lot
Thank
to
you for your
Thanks
call.
to
very
That
have
was
much.
you
great.
call in.
Bye.
And you have a beautiful accent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oops. Caller, go ahead. You're on the air.
Oh, Dr. Gary, I listen to you on the interview room, on the inner room all the time. I love it. This is
What's
a
your name?
smaller, more pertaining to me, but maybe someone else can benefit.
Really quick.
My
Are you?
husband
Is your?
strangled me to the point of involuntary urination in front of my kids, and everybody tells me like,
Can you turn down your background? It's causing an echo. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
And what is the
yeah,
person's name and username? So maybe I'll recognize them from the interview room. What's your handle on YouTube?
Redondo Beach.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. I remember commenting recently that I enjoy your comments in the interview room.
Yeah, and sorry,
Oh, thank
just
you.
go ahead and start over. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Okay, no worries. All right, so long story short, never had any domestic violence in our relationship until one day when he strangled me to the point of involuntary urination in front of my kids. Never seen police so gaslit by a man before. People who you would think are there to help you. I mean, it's just mind blowing. If it wasn't happening, I wouldn't believe it. There's definitely trauma that needs to be dealt with. I just don't know how to tackle it.
Is your YouTube still going in the background?
Nope.
Okay. All right. Go ahead. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Dr. Gary. You there, Gary? Dr.
So,
Gary?
Josh,
Are we frozen now?
it's like a David Lynch movie, Josh.
Yeah, I don't know.
You hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes. 1, 2,
You hear
Freddie's
me?
coming for you. Do you hear
Yes,
me?
we can hear you too. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. So is the caller back?
Yep.
Yes.
Well, I guess I'll just say generally in response to what we heard of the call, and it's unfortunate we're having so many problems, Josh. You know, we've been on this call, this show, since about 9 minutes after 12 Eastern, right? Which means we've been on for 46 minutes. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. So in that 46 minutes, now let's calculate this. In that 46 minutes that we've been on the air, according to statistics, 920 people have been victims of domestic violence in the United States since we've been on. And with the additional minute, that goes up by another 20. So you have to pause a minute and understand what that means. I mean, you're talking about that right now, as we speak, somebody is in the confines of a home and somebody is destroying them, not necessarily only hitting them, but doing what the Romans used to do. You know, they didn't just leave a place or destroy, they had to salt the earth so nothing else could ever grow there again, you know, so no one else could ever have it. That's what these people do. They destroy you, and you want to understand that it can involve children, it can involve long-term partners, and it isn't only hitting an emotional abuse. There's also financial abuse where you hold the money and you don't let a person, you know, have the freedom to do what they want. You don't let a person go out with their friends. You don't let a person see their family. You tell those people that everything is a lie other than what you're telling them, right? And then, of course, you know, there are, you know, not to get into this, but there are also in the world leaders that have their entire country in a gigantic abusive relationship, right? They act exactly like the people that are in an abusive relationship in a household. There's that too. You can see that in certain malignant people that you know that are out in the world that's doing that to you. You could have even what you think is a friend that's doing that. Uh-oh. Did you hear me there? Josh, are you hearing what I'm saying?
Yep.
Okay. So, you know, so these are all,
Yes,
you
I
know,
heard most of it.
in other words, that kind of personality can destroy you. And but they don't. You know, your spirit can still get out of there. You can still get out of there, you know. And it's very, very important that even though the person wants you to think that you can't live without them, that the secret is that they wouldn't be doing that to you unless they thought that they couldn't live without you. That's the thing. So the person has the idea that you have to be there and under complete and total control. Now, I don't know I'm not speaking directly to your situation, but speaking generally. I cannot speak directly to your situation. But, you know, I think it is very important for people who are experiencing that to realize it. The tragedy of it is that a lot of people who are experiencing it have no idea. They make excuses for the person. They rationalize it away. Their friends point it out and they say, "No, no, no, he's just kidding when he says those things. He doesn't mean it. He'd never hurt me." You know. Now, Josh can speak eloquently about this because he's seen it. Isn't that true, Josh?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm definitely uh, come from a family that suffered from domestic violence and ultimately paid really the ultimate price. And the only good advice that I could give anybody is that I don't think that people once they start abusing you, I don't know. I don't know many people that change that behavior. I don't know many people that do it, especially on their own. I think any abusive relationship should be ended personally. When it's specifically
Said than
not
done if
just
the person. Yeah, it's easier said than done, Josh. If the person has created a dependency
no question
situation.
about it. That's why my words are just words. I mean, you have to go by. Obviously, you have to go by every situation, but I just, I don't know, man. I just, if there's any advice that I could give, would be that I don't think people like that change, and do what you can to get away, but don't announce it. I always say that because I think that's when
Well, luckily, I am away, and for better or for worse, I am a fighter, and I've got some things up my sleeve. Nothing bad, like all legally and whatnot, because there's kids involved. But I'm out. I'm safe. And part of it is like, I'm like, do you not remember who you were married to for so long? Like, is there any stretch of the imagination that you don't think I'm gonna fight back? Not in a way I shouldn't fight back, but the right way.
Definitely. And I'm glad that you're away and that you're safe and you do everything in your power to keep it that way.
Thank you.
And thank you for calling. I really appreciate it.
I jumped on YouTube just at the right time. Thanks.
Bye-bye. What's that?
Thank you. So, Josh, it does look like you fixed whatever the issue was, and now people can.
Yeah, how did that call sound?
What'd you ask?
How did that call sound?
Sounded good on my end. I mean, the content was very painful, but it was nice that we could hear the person. I feel that I'm afraid that we might seem invalidating because we can't really hear what the people are saying, and they're talking about such powerful things. It's very sad.
Well, I don't know. I mean, sounds like I don't even know what the hell's going on here. Let's try it. Let's try some more. Hi, caller. Go ahead. You're on the air.
Hello.
Hi. Where are you calling from? What's your name?
Hi there. I'm calling from Boston. This is Ms. Marple.
What's the name, Josh?
Me in a sense.
Say your name again.
I'm sorry, I've got a little bit of a frog in my throat.
What's your name again?
Ms. Marple.
Oh, Miss Marple. Is she saying Miss Marple? The one from the audience?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
I know who you are. You've been sending messages for a long time. Well, I love Miss Marple. Miss Marple's one of the coolest Agatha Christie characters.
Thank you. I think so too.
She's pretty cool. Who's your favorite person to play Miss Marple? Margaret Rutherford?
How did you guess?
I never guessed.
She was not true to the actual Agatha Christie character, really.
But she was fun.
But she was so wonderful that to this day, I still go back and watch her movies.
She was kind of dizzy. She had a way of being kind of eccentric and kind of dizzy, but she was brilliant. I think probably the truer depiction might be Joan Hickson, but I think it's very cool. I'm a
Yeah.
mystery nut, so of course I love Miss Marple. The only thing I don't like about Agatha Christie is that you can't really solve them, the information until the end, when Poirot gets up and kind of
Yeah.
tells you how he used his little gray cells to solve it or whatever. And so that kind of bothers me. I like a mystery that
Yeah.
I could crack before I get to the end. But anyway, that's really, really cool.
Me too. Me too. Now I do. Yes. And that's one of the reasons I took an interest in true crime. I wanted to learn
Why?
to think based on fact,
Yeah.
not fantasy. But my question for
Okay.
you
So what would you like to ask us about today?
is, well, is there something you can share with us from your background
Mhm.
that you think contributed to the career you ultimately chose,
Oh, you want to know how I got into it?
that influenced?
Okay.
Not
I mean,
exactly, but
if you want to open up that can of
that's part of it, you know. But there are certain things you can't share on,
yeah, that's true.
you know.
Well,
But if there's something you can point to that influenced you early on.
right. It's an interesting question. Now, one of the things I'll tell you is that anyone who knows me, which is sort of a paradoxical statement based on what I'm about to say, knows that
Mhm.
I'm very immune to the pick locks people use to try to find out things about myself, because I have a tendency to not talk very much about myself. I'll talk about things I enjoy or whatever, but I don't like to generally talk about myself because I like to be very focused on the other person. It's very weird for me to be the person that's
Right.
being asked about myself. But, it's like when people ask me how I am, my answer is usually, I don't know. It's been so long since somebody asked me. I have no idea. But I would say this. I think that if you wind up in this kind of career, there's probably a whole series of threads that lead to it. And in my case, I think
Mhm.
I was moving along the lines of wanting to be a priest. And that's why I'm sort of in the odd position, of that I never married, for example, because I had gone to school for some time to be a priest, and then I decided that I didn't want to do that, but I wanted a life that was very similar, where I can basically help people in that same way. And so I became extremely interested in questions like, what is evil? What is the difference between things that happen forensically and spiritual things? Are people who are suffering from mental illness sometimes suffering from a problem of philosophy? Are they existentially alone? What is in a person spiritually? And what does that tell you about, the way that that person is going to handle life events? Those are all things that fascinated me, and so I decided to live a life that was very outward in terms of how to help people. And now the other thing is that in order to do this kind of work, you actually have to be a very, how do I say this? You have to be an extremely sensitive and deep soul. You have to be a person that is really good at understanding the inner workings of the self and the spirit and all of that, right? So you have to be somebody that is okay with sponging the feelings of other people, right? Going, looking at a crime scene and being able to imagine yourself into it. Going, you go to the party and you can say, I don't know why, but I can feel that that person over there is feeling kind of alone, that kind of thing, right? You've got to be a kind of empathy machine, and that comes at a cost. Empathy is exhausting, just like anxiety is. It's like exaggerated activity of the limbic system, right? And so what happens, I think, is that you start to see yourself as the opposite end of a spectrum, right? There's like the psychopath who has no fear, no, compassion, no, excitement of the limbic system on one end, and on the other end, these people that overfeel and overcare. It's very costly and very tiresome. And so what happens is you become
Mm.
sort of introverted. You fold in on the self, and you give all your time to helping other people, and you sort of take all that stuff, and then you need big patches of time by yourself, right? You need to do a lot of reading, a lot of praying, a lot of meditating, a lot of
Mm.
sleeping, a lot of writing, a lot of whatever. And you do it
I've
because
experienced that
you're
myself.
basically recharging the battery for that work. And I think that has to be the spirit of it. If you're into it because you're titillated by the crime, or you just think it's sort of
Uh-huh.
exciting, to talk about these horrible things, these are, I think, the wrong reasons to go down that path. You go into it because you want to help the victims, and not everyone has the capacity to go into the darkness to do that, right? So if you're going to talk to a victim of, let's say, childhood SA, right? You're going to talk to a kid that's gone through that, right? Or you're going to talk to, a woman in her 80s who was assaulted, or you're going to talk to somebody who, was burned by somebody abusing them, literally, like burned, horrible things.
And
You have to be okay going into that and looking at it for what it really is. So I think that the empathy thing, the ability to sort of detach from the horror and look at the humanity of the human that's in front of me, the spiritual stuff, the big questions that sort of underlie it, and the general training in psychology, I think what came together to put me in just the right place. And then when I started to encounter people that worked in the field, really, important, prominent people, what I was amazed by is that they were impressed by me. So I would talk to them and they would say, "Wow, I didn't think of it that way before." Or they would say, you know,
uh,
"Wow, that gives me a new idea.
but
Let's
you're
do a
not
project
surprised.
together." And before you knew it, all my childhood heroes became my mentors and coworkers and colleagues, and I was in the field.
Um,
And here I am. I wound up doing this podcast stuff in a limited way because Chris McDonough from the Cold Case Foundation, for which I was recommended by one of my
mhm.
beloved colleagues, said, "I'd like to have you on." And I think the first one I did for the interview room was about Kohlberger. And people probably remember that I did that profile before anyone was ever
And it's like,
arrested. And I sort of used all my empathy and whatever, and was able to picture this guy. And if he's guilty, I think people will have to admit that it was a pretty good snapshot of a person. Now, I don't know how to explain,
mhm.
how I do that, but I do. And so I think it's kind of deductive and sensitive at the same time. So, the answer is it's a whole bunch of threads that came together, a whole bunch of luck, and perhaps, somebody up there, kind of wanting me to do it. And but it does, as I'm trying to emphasize to anybody who's interested in pursuing that career, it is not the Silence of the Lambs, right? You're not running around like Jodie Foster, with a handgun, and profiling one killer by talking to another, and this is all, fantasy land. Most of it is being an unseen
Right.
person sitting in an office or going to a jail or whatever, and or prison, talking to people, hearing the worst stories you've ever heard in your life, sometimes helping victims, and being unrewarded, living a quiet existence where you share your thoughts, whatever, but you don't do it for fame or money or whatever. You just do it because you love it and you're helping people. You remember the victims. And one of the reasons I like Josh, um, very, very few podcasts I'll go on because let me tell you, a lot of them horrify me. But I like Josh because I know Josh's motivation is at the end of the day to kind of let the buck stop with him in terms of a lot of evil that he has seen. And what he's really doing, I think, is kind of filling in a hole that's been left, a kind of maw that's been left by terrible things that he has seen. And of course, what he proves is that the person who did these things that he always talks about, his father, you know, also genetically contributed to creating him. And so what it shows is that from the same bloodline, some good can erupt, whether one intends it or not.
Well,
And
I
I
mean,
think
I
by doing that,
scare me,
right.
to be honest with you.
Yeah. But the point is, you know, you could go one direction or the other, right? Remember when Truman Capote became very fixated on one of the two killers in Cold Blood. Remember, he becomes very fixated on going to the jail and
Yeah.
becoming friends with. And
Right.
he said he said it was like we were born in the same house, but I went out the front door and he went out the back. Well, that's really how it is, right? The same family can produce, typhus or swans. And I think, to me, as somebody that's in that kind of archetypical role of being like the outsider that's kind of looking at people and trying to understand them, I've I'm very drawn to people who I know are motivated by goodness, really motivated by goodness. And of course, there are a lot of people who don't understand Josh, and they say ridiculous things about him, and he teases and the whole thing. But at the end of the day, his heart is very good and very sensitive, and so I like to appear on the show. And there aren't many I'd go on. I get asked all the time, but I don't go on many of them because I have to believe that it's coming from the heart. The minute I think it's about self-aggrandizement or putting out nonsense ideas that are going to hurt the case and all this stuff, I have no interest. I just have no interest in it. So it's testament to you, Josh, that
Wow.
I'm interested in coming on.
Very,
But anyway, so that's the long answer. I mean, I told you you were opening a can of worms with a question, but I mention it only because I went through that, only because there are people who write to me every week. Somebody in the audience writes to me and says, I want to do this work too. How do I do it? And the truth is, I wouldn't suggest it to everybody. It's not for everybody.
Right.
You have to have the wind in your sails of that work having a meaning that has a philosophy behind it that is good. Otherwise, you're in it for the wrong reason. So now, is there anything else I
Well, I
could
believe
answer
that's
for you? I
good
mean,
for
hope
you
that
to
that was
do
like the longest answer ever, and I'm so sorry. I wouldn't wish it on a dog to have to listen to me that long, but
No,
I
it's
appreciate.
wonderful. And
Yeah. Okay.
I
I'd make
love
So
Otis listen to it.
psychology. And and I realized after a youth filled with Agatha Christie novels that the real reason I loved them were not the murders, but it was the psychology that they would give out about human nature and understanding people. That's what really appealed to me.
well, it's funny because if you understand people, the curse of it is that you can see goodness in everyone, and that's very hard. If you go in and you talk to a murderer, it bothers you that you like them. If you can see the humanity in them, it's very, very painful because you realize that, there's goodness in there. I always say when I'm training people, I always say, if you hate
Very.
somebody, if you go in, you talk to a murderer, a butcher, whatever, try to find or ask for a picture, from someone, that You might know the case, on the internet, whatever. See if you can find a picture of what they look like when they were a kid. My experience is that it is impossible to hate someone if you see a picture of them as a little kid. You can't, because it makes you realize that each of us is like a kind of imagine a marble, a beautiful luminescent marble that's rolling along and it gets all this caked on crap, all this mud on it. And in the right hands, if they wipe the mud off, they can see that in the center of it is that marble. And I find when I talk to people that I'm always trying to look through the mud, you know, the mean people, the hurt people, the people that once were very idealistic and got slammed by life, who've had everything taken from them, the losers in life's game, who don't even get invited to the table. Those kind of people, inside of them is that same glowing, luminescent thing. And sometimes life is fantastic for people. Everything goes right. The biggest problem they have is what flavor noodle salad they're going to have at the picnic, and other people get slammed with crap from the day they're born, and it's not fair. But in the end, when it all comes together, what you realize is that the charmed existence is no blessing at all, because it insulates you from reality. It isolates you from the joy of needing other people, and it isolates you from the truth that you need God. That's why, as I always say, being broken by life, feeling the crack of the twig in life, being down in the mud is the stuff of heroes and saints, because they are called. God uses that to make them realize that they need Him, that they need other people. And that makes for a more fulfilling life and probably a more fulfilling afterlife. But those people that are charmed beginning to end,
Well, in the word minister,
you worry about them.
sorry, the word minister means through the dust. So that goes along with your illustration.
Mm.
Hello?
Yeah, she said that it goes along with your illustration, Dr. Gary. Yeah, and I took care of that. I got it done.
Yeah. Any other questions?
But
I'd love to.
well, yeah, we got a couple other calls, but I appreciate you calling. Thank you so much. It was very, very great call.
Yeah, and I'm sorry for the long answer. Miss Marple is somebody who has been writing to me in messages and so forth for a long time, and I felt like I kind of owed her an answer to the question, these very deep kind of things that she always answers. So it was a long-winded answer, but I hope I didn't put everybody to sleep. But I hope it meant something to somebody.
Thank you so much for
We'll
calling.
hear the lesson. Watch us back. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, moving right along here. And Dr. Gray, did you know there was a plane crash tonight?
I did.
Wow.
Yeah, it was sad stuff.
Yeah. Caller, go ahead. You're on the air.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. I'm Debbie, and I'm calling from Tennessee.
Very good.
Hello.
And I have
Love that state. I love Tennessee.
Fortunate to have a 32-year teaching career, junior high language arts.
What did she say, Josh?
And in Tennessee, within the past 12 months, in Nashville, we've had 2 school shootings close to the age that I did teach. The shooters were 13, 14, somewhere in that range.
And of
So
course, you
So
had
they both left
the Aiden
Minnesota.
Hale shooting. The Aiden Hale shooting was in Nashville,
And there's
right at the
about a
Covenant
year
School,
ago, there was another
right,
one
right. And then there was
in
the
Nashville.
Antioch
So,
High School shooting, right? Yeah.
right. And the
Mhm.
Tennessee Three in the legislature led anti-gun movement, or at least gun safety legislation proposed in Nashville. So
So sad.
having worked with
You
those
mean 8 days
kids
ago, I
for
think,
32
Antioch
years,
was, right? Yeah.
I found that working with poetry in the classroom with that age
Right.
seemed very
Plus,
interesting and effective with those kids.
Mm.
For example, Emily Dickinson wrote a poem, My Life Withstood a Loaded Gun.
Ah, yes.
And the loaded gun poem ends with, though I than he may longer live, he longer must than I, for I have but the power to kill without the power to die. So the kids and I would talk about that poem a lot. And we would usually come to the conclusion that her loaded gun was her poetry. And even though she is now passed on, her words are still alive.
Yes.
So she found a way to be meaningful through her poetry,
Yes.
while these children seem to have the literal gun
Yeah.
without anything in their life that they could be a metaphor for a gun.
A very beautiful point that you're making, because
Does
what you're
that make
getting at
sense?
is the idea that it's about a person attempting to give life a kind of a meaning. And I think you're right. I think that's exactly true. And it gets right to the heart of what we were saying earlier about the choices. You could do it one way or another way, right? And Dickinson was a good example of an empathic, detached person that I think led a pretty solitary life, and was able to produce the most beautiful poetry about what was really going on inside of people. And I think that's is she a favorite of yours? She's certainly a favorite of mine. Are you a very big Emily Dickinson fan?
And I am. Her poem, Hope is the Thing with Feathers,
Mm-hmm.
that perches in the soul,
Oh, yes.
and, and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all.
Hmm.
So these kids need to learn how to sing the tune without the words.
Well, I think the idea is that a bird sings and feels that way because it's free. But what happens when a bird is in a bird cage and it's not where it belongs, and it doesn't understand that a cage could open and it could get out and experience happiness again? It doesn't understand that there's anything beyond that cage. And I think that's exactly what happens. And for people like that, hope feels stupid. for people like that, hope isn't a thing with feathers. It's a thing with fetters. It makes them feel trapped and stupid. And it's a very tragic thing
But she
when
goes
you
on
get
to
to a
say
place in life, right, where hope feels stupid.
sweetest in the gale is heard,
Mm,
and sore may be the storm
right.
that could have dashed the little bird that kept so many warm.
Mm, right.
So these kids sometimes at this age, they feel like that they don't have hope.
That's right. Or they
Or
feel that hope is dumb. They feel hope is stupid.
yeah,
And
what
listen,
they don't have the words of what they need to say.
well, the
But
language
that's what interests
starts
me
not
so
even
much about
figuring
these
into it.
manifestos.
Right, but language starts not even figuring into it because they don't have anyone to talk to. You have to have someone who cares. That's why I always say I am convinced from having to talk to offenders. I've talked to people who told me that they were very close to committing suicide and they were interrupted. Sometimes people are interrupted by somebody who is kind. It sounds hokey, but it's true. You have to be the person who says to someone, "You want some company? Oh, you ate a tuna fish sandwich today? That's awesome. That's cool. I'm interested." See, that when you care about the minutia of a person's life, they'll tell you anything. It's sort of like the story Christ told about the person making a very big fuss over a little tiny amount of money. And then the person realized that they could trust them with anything, with any amount of money. Because if you make a fuss out of the tiniest amount of money, then you could be trusted with anything. And it's the same thing with people's feelings. If you
Mm-hmm.
think it's really important that somebody took a walk in the park today, that person will love you and they will let themselves be loved by you. And then they'll trust you with anything. That's the whole idea. So you get in with those little things. See? Just like you told me that you like Emily
Right.
Dickinson, and that's important to me. That really matters. I think that's really important because Emily Dickinson is somebody that you read in the privacy of your home, in the privacy of a room, and she's speaking to your soul, right? From across the generations. And to share it with somebody is like letting them into a private little room. It's a big deal to share that with somebody. But the world is too filled with people that are not willing to go over to somebody and say, "I'm nobody. Are you nobody too?" Right?
Right.
To quote
Well,
Dickinson.
once I had the whole piece of thing with feathers
Mm.
poem written on the board. And I just posed the question to the students. Why do you think she used a bird?
Mm.
And one boy who was a very reluctant reader,
Hmm.
not a successful student, hand popped up. And he said, because a bird is free.
Hmm.
Well,
The same thing you said.
I was kind of thinking that as well. Like why a bird? And I think that not just that a bird is free, but the bird has ultimate freedom, meaning a bird can
Mm.
fly anywhere. It has the capability to soar across rivers and lakes and oceans, and there's almost no bounds to the freedom. But also, birds can be caged, and if a bird is caged, they have no freedom whatsoever. So they can go from just straight captivity to a wide open world. Like Dr. Gary, you can't walk on water, so
Right.
you can't cross a lake. But a bird can walk around the lake if it wanted to. It could fly across if it wanted to. They're very symbolic creatures. I can't stand them because they're mean, but they're
She sings at the end of the poem
go ahead.
that never in extremity it asks a crumb of me. So
Well-
the bird is free and it doesn't cost you anything to hope.
Yes, but to take the symbolism further, a bird has to believe that it's held up by something that it doesn't see. It's flapping in the air, and it's supported by something that it doesn't see. And that's why they're such good emblems for some of these people. They are, a lot of them are held up. They are supported, but they don't believe it. You have to believe that you are. And so the idea of
Yes,
hope is a
yes,
thing with
that-
feathers. It's also,
you're
you
going to
see what
be
I'm
able to
saying? It's
do
also
it.
say that again? What did you say?
You have to trust that you're going to be able to do it.
That's it. Exactly. Exactly. Right. And I think they're fascinating in that sense, right? And so that I think the notion of hope is that you do it when it seems ridiculous. Imagine a baby bird, how scared it is when it realizes that it's sort of ridiculous to think that it's going to jump out over the tree branch and be able to soar. But it finds that it can.
Yes.
And I think that's beautiful. So that ultimately they're symbols, I think, of faith. Of faith. Right? So that I think that's what Dickinson meant.
Well, Emily wrote a
And
lot about birds and bees, flowers, lots of things in nature.
of course. I mean, it was popular at the time she was writing to do that. But I think it's a
But,
beautiful thing to talk
the
about Emily
Loaded Gun
Dickinson.
poem,
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
the Loaded Gun poem she wrote during the Civil War.
Yes, it's true. That's true. I
So there
love
was
that
a
poem.
lot of death around her. So she wrote a lot about death.
Mhm. Yeah. Well,
But I
there are
find
a
that
lot of very
Emily
beautiful.
Dickinson speaks to the age of these children who are becoming disturbed.
Yes. Right.
And I would encourage anyone who works with children to not skip the poetry,
I mean, it's
to
great.
always
Yeah, that's a
include
beautiful,
the
beautiful
poetry.
piece of advice. And the poem you're talking about, the my life had stood a loaded gun. I think I remember that the second verse of it says, "And now we roam in sovereign woods, and now we hunt the doe, and every time I speak for him, the
Yes.
mountains straight reply." Right. And I always love that because if you get what she's saying, it really is very beautiful. Well, I think that's a good place to stop and
Yeah, it's a
keep
great
reading
poem.
Dickinson. You never get tired. And they found some new ones, on the insides of envelopes of letters she sent. So apparently there are more Dickinson poems that we had no idea existed. So you'll have to read those, and we could talk about them some other time. Thank you very much.
We got another
That
call
was
here.
an unexpectedly beautiful call, Josh.
It was very nice. 971. Go ahead. You're on the air. Where are you calling from? What's your name?
This is Melissa from Portland, Oregon.
Melissa from Portland, Oregon. Welcome.
Pleasure.
Thank you. I have a question for Dr. B. It's
Oh
about a
boy.
very
I like that
cold
your name
case
is Melissa and you called me Dr.
from
B. Doesn't Melissa mean
1912.
bee? Go ahead.
Okay. And
Delay again,
it's
Josh.
the Villisca axe murders.
Oh, yes. Hmm.
And they never caught the perpetrator. And I was wondering if you were familiar with the case and if possibly you could profile that at all.
Well, I'd have to go into my notes to get all the details about it. But why don't you summarize the pertinent background? I mean, it's an infamous case, but why don't you summarize for everybody the basics and I could tell you what I think.
Right. Okay. In June of 1912 in Villisca, Iowa,
Right.
5 family members came home from church, along with 2 members that were friends of the children of the family. And all 7 people were murdered with an axe in their sleep.
And the father was Josiah, wasn't that right? Josiah
Yep.
and Sarah are the parents, and then they have 4
Correct.
kids, right? And they're all
Is
butchered.
that the one that went and
And
took the photos before
yeah.
they died?
Yes.
And so do you have any particular theory of what went on there? I mean, what kind of character you think would have committed that murder? Any thoughts?
Well,
Clues?
I think it had a psychosexual element to it, and I don't think it was this guy's first rodeo,
Hmm.
but that's all I've got.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
But it wasn't only like chopping. There was also like bludgeoning and there was like, it was pretty nasty stuff. I mean, this was a ferocious attack, right? You understand? I mean, it was brutal, absolutely brutal. And
Yeah.
look, as I said, this is a mass murder, right? So the reason I'm familiar with it is because it was included in our database. It's a famous and infamous mass murder. And it was in this place where those kinds of things just didn't happen. You know what I mean? Like it was like completely shocking. And the notion of somebody coming into the intimacy of the home and doing that, I mean, the home
Hmm.
invasion element, it was really nasty. Now, as I mentioned, when a mass murder is committed by something other than a gun, you start thinking mental illness, more likely to be mentally ill, or somebody with serious coping problems. And everything about that case has an extremely disorganized quality to it because it's really high risk. It was really gruesome. The instrument was one where you strike the person and they're probably going to wake up, if they're sleeping when you attack them. It isn't like a gun where you shoot them and they're dead. You're talking about needing to have a ferocity, and just repetitively chopping Lizzie Borden style, right? The person. And there were, there's a whole family, a whole group of people there, house guests, the whole thing. So it was very high risk, very, very gruesome. I have to look at what time of day it was, but I don't think it was the evening. If I remember correctly, there's like an element to it where it's very risky on a lot of levels. And so those things are very suggestive of a person who was disturbed emotionally. And I would guess, based on that, that the person who did that was probably a local person who was either unwell or extremely enraged. And if they were a disorganized, kind of mentally ill person, they didn't even necessarily have to know these people, right? If it was a grudge against these people, well, then the police would have sort of sorted it out and figured out there was a particular person who was honed in on these people for some reason. But as I understand it, not everyone who was killed was directly related, right? Weren't there house guests that came over the house? Isn't that true? The caller still there?
Yeah, she
Yes,
just got
2
another call.
children.
Right. So there was an indiscriminate quality, which you also see in people that are unwell, right? The other thing that has the feeling of that is exactly what this person said, right? So the you just pick up something that's there. That's very different than the psychosexual person, the killing, where you need everything for fantasy, right? You bring the weapon with you, right? Think, for example, to bring it into contemporary terms, think of the home invasion and mass murder in Idaho. Not Iowa like this one, but in Idaho, in the case of which Koberger is accused. If he did it, he brought that knife with him, and it looks like would have purchased that knife in advance by many months, probably because it's part of a fantasy, a very particular fantasy. You go into somebody's house and you randomly pick up an axe and you do that. It doesn't have a psychosexual flavor necessarily. You might be expressing rage or pent up rage or something psychosexually, but it doesn't really have that feeling to it. It has the feeling of a deranged person who takes whatever is there, bludgeons people, axes them. And notice, as I said, it's indiscriminate, it's risky. So those things point to me to a disorganized offender, probably mentally ill, and consequently probably local. They probably, I mean, why on earth would somebody single out that random home in the middle of Iowa? So it seems to me that they could have solved that crime probably by finding some local person who would have been known to people because they would have stood out as weird. Remember in the Idaho case, when I profiled it, I said, when they find this guy, people are going to say that this person was odd, nasty, paranoid, with a grudge, odd. Right? That's different than the kind of groomy type of offender, the offender who's suave and seduces you, with his words, or very different. This is a nasty kind of a character who's hot-headed and explosive and disorganized and weird. So the local people would have known this person. See? Yes, it's an infamous unsolved crime, one of the most famous unsolved mass murders. And so I hope, that's what I would say. I think if they had modern profiling techniques and things at the time, I think they would have solved that case. But unfortunately, I think it's lost to history. I don't think anything has been preserved that could be checked for DNA. But never give up hope. I mean, look, they have a DNA sample on a scarf that was worn by a Jack the Ripper victim, right? That is being used to try to tie through genealogical data and the sort of great whatever, ancestor of one of the victims. I think they may be able to get some sense of whose DNA is on there and what happened there. So it's amazing stuff. You never know. But I don't think they preserved anything that could be tested. So I think that case is lost to history. But it's fascinating. So I hope that helped. But I appreciate your point about the psychosexual release, but this isn't a person who would release that in a normal way, right? This is an angry, explosive, immature, inadequate person, disturbed person. So, Josh, do we have another call? Did you get tired yet of this? You enjoying it?
Yeah, it's fine.
You want to keep going?
I do.
Okay.
See here.
People keep talking about Michael Vaughn in the audience. That's I think you did really good work on that case.
Yeah,
I watched everything
tomorrow
you
I'm
did.
actually doing the final of the main suspects is tomorrow, and it's a haunting case from the simple
Oh, I
fact
know.
of the other day I was talking about how when I had my kids were really young and how they sometimes may wander further than they're supposed to. And when you yell for them, if you don't get that immediate yell back, hey, yeah, it's just terrifying. And
What's the theory that you have about what that crime was about?
Yeah, my theory is that there were four messed up people who, for whatever reason, and I don't know the reason why Michael was abducted. I just, I hate to speculate, but you know that it's somewhat, you know, sexual in nature, possibly, that, you know, children are abducted and just brutalized, and um money would
Wasn't
probably be
part of the
motivation, but also I think that there's a, because Stacy said something just not too long ago on his last interview with, he's like, I've never been charged with anything, like I've never been charged with sex crimes or something, and nobody has brought that up. You know, he did. But we don't know what the charges are going to be. But I think that they had this dumb, idiotic, evil plan, and they were out to do it, and that Michael was just the kid that came across them that day.
opportunistically.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't think that now let me be very careful here, because this is just, I don't know, a speculatory question, but isn't one of the people that, at least in the court of public opinion, I mean, there's been no formal charge, right? Isn't one of the people female that's in the
Yeah.
conspiracy thing,
And she's believed
according
to
to
be
what
the ringleader.
right? And am I correct that she was somebody who was struggling to have a family or whatever? I mean, did I hear you say that?
Yeah. The reason is that they said that her husband, who rode bull at one time,
An injury to the, all right, to
he
the
took
down
him right.
regions, yes. Well, the
Leaves
reason
him
I ask is because I'm not talking about this case now. I'm going to be general. Women do not generally engage in kidnap unless, in my experience, one of two things is true. Either they're extremely disturbed, right? There's some emotional disturbance going on, or they have some weird fantasy that that's going to be their child. It's almost like you see in the crime that Michael and I named, fetus snatching, right? If you look it up in Wikipedia, Michael Stone and I called it that, right? Other people have called it fetal abduction. We called it fetus snatching. There was no name for it when we was to write about it, so we gave it that name. And it's similar to that, I think. And you know, it's interesting because the notion that a woman would take a child or be interested in taking a child for sexual reasons is very, very unusual. That's almost doesn't happen, you know. So that you start thinking, is somebody unwell, or do they want to be a mom, or what, something more along those lines?
Well,
But
I
then what
think that
happens is in these
I
cases
think
is
there's
that
some of
the
that.
men that get involved may have other ideas.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't think that they. I think that they had several ideas, but I don't. That's just me speculating. I don't think that it was a well thought out plan. I don't think that, they, boom, here's what we do. Boom, 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 boom. I think that she may have had plans, and somebody else may have had other plans, and so on. That's why when people say, well, why would they do that? Why would they kidnap a child? Because it is believed that he is no longer with us. And, they say, well, why would you kidnap a child just to kill him? And, I don't know, but I do know that things go horribly wrong, horribly fast.
I know,
And
it's
especially,
terrible.
yeah. So I kind
And the
of,
kid was so
the
cute, right?
cutest. The cute, yeah, man. I mean, he's just a little dude wanting to play, like, just to go play with others. Like he just want to go pet some some puppies.
There's no consolation at all that I've ever been able to come up with in talking to people that have lost children. None, absolutely none. If someone is very religious, you can say to them that it is very beautiful to reflect on how pure that soul will be when it comes before God.
Yeah.
And you can
Right.
imagine how much God loves, a soul like that, that's never been painted by very much darkness and, in terms of what it, committing any, certainly been touched by it. But I think that there really is nothing to say except to just be there and listen but it's extraordinary. I think that may be the worst pain emotionally that a person
Dr.
could
Gary,
go
I
through.
have stopped,
Yeah.
When people ask me, like, what do you think the motive is? Unless to me, there's a very clear motive, and there are clear motives in crimes. This isn't one of those situations. And so it's really hard for me to speculate,
No, that's what I'm saying. That's why I'm speaking generally just about
No,
how
I know.
weird it would
You know,
be
but it's
for a
also like
woman to.
the Idaho 4, people would ask, what's the motivation? And I mean, you have a much more clinical explanation than I do. But to me, some people are just messed up, man. They're just violent, scary people. And I know that's very generalized for you, but I don't think you have to have a motive to commit crimes. I think
Well, it
people
doesn't
just do it.
matter in court. Doesn't
It
matter in a courtroom
certainly doesn't
unless
matter to
you were
me.
motivated by so much mental illness that you didn't know what you were doing, and that's not even in every state that they would care. But
Right.
motive is not important, and it should be, but it isn't.
Well,
That's what the whole
in
scale
the
is
Alex
about in the
Murdaugh
legal, right?
case, motive probably mattered there, you know.
Of course,
But that's what I'm
especially if
saying. Like,
somebody might get out.
yeah, but I'm saying like a motive in a case like that is completely understandable. But I just, to me, there's no motive for stealing a child other than evil, and that's all I can. That's really all I can explain. I've seen evil.
Well,
I've been
yeah,
around it. I understand that, but I can't explain it.
right.
And
Well,
it's very it's honestly it's just heartbreaking. That
terrible. Yeah.
this little kid Michael Vaughn encountered these, for lack of a better term, scumbags. Say they're completely innocent, which I don't believe that they are, and I do believe that they're going to get charged. I have all the reason in the world to believe that.
Well,
They're
I
not
don't
good.
know anything about
Well,
it.
they're
I'm
not
not
good. They're not
saying
good
or
people. They're not good people. I've seen their records. I mean, they're felons that hold people at gunpoint, that physically assault, demean, lie, steal, cheat. That's what they do. So they're just not good people. You know what I mean? And
so sad.
so whatever their motivation is, I don't know. I don't know what their motivation is. They're just terrible, terrible people. We got another call. Let's take another call real quick. Then we can just discuss some more.
Well, you've done very good work.
Well, I appreciate that. It's very it's very near and dear, along with a lot of people. Callie Dime's in here, and I know that she's been a fierce.
Yeah, she's great. I've seen her in your
She's
audience many,
a
many
great
times.
friend to Brandy, and there's just a lot of people, and I've talked to a lot of people about this case, kind of behind the scenes, that know this case inside and out. And the reason, and I tell them, thank you, because I work with them. They help me with information and to understand exactly what's going on and things like that. And, they always say, I don't want you to use my name or anything like that. I'm just, this case is like very dear to me. So what I do is I just use my platform to boost what they know, what they think is important, and also what I feel is important. I add my own, you know. Caller, go ahead. You're on the air.
Hi, Josh and Dr. Gary. Can you hear me?
Sure
Oh,
can.
yes, better than anyone else we've heard all night. You're loud and clear.
Oh, that's great. This is Gwen from Texas.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi. I have a quick question. Hopefully it'll be quick. I am a survivor of Daisy, and I was married to him for 22 years. And you're so correct about not realizing that you're in that situation until somebody told you.
Mm-hmm.
And mine got worse the further I tried to pull away from him. I didn't realize how controlling he had gotten.
Huh. Yeah.
And I had no control of any finances. He stole my car. He had control over everything. But when it was already emotional abuse, but when it got physical, that's when I knew I had to leave. I have 3 boys that I didn't want them to see that it was okay to treat a woman that way. My question is, I divorced after 4 years in court. He kept trying to control and deny that he didn't want to get the divorce. Anyway, finally got it done. And I found a wonderful man and we married, and I'm happy. But he remarried. And my concern is, did I have talked to her before she married him? Or do you think that he was only going to be like that with me, or you think that behavior is going to continue?
The question puts me in a very complicated position because to answer it would be giving clinical advice, which I cannot do because I don't know you personally or your background or anything. So I can't. In fact, I wouldn't even answer it generally because it would be too obvious that I was answering a personal question for you. But I think it's something that would be better discussed offline in terms of directing you to somebody that could talk to you about that. I know the answer I would give if I could, but I just feel that it's best not to because this is such a clinical question that you're asking. And you know what I'm saying? Do you understand that it puts me in a complicated position? But my heart goes out to you, and believe me, I wish I could discuss it. But I think it's one of those questions that sort of toes the line too much in terms of. But I guess I can ask you, what does your gut tell you?
Well, I don't have a real good relationship with his wife, but I'm concerned about her safety.
Mm-hmm.
So I might try it, but he probably said her a lot of stuff about me, and she may not believe me anyway.
Here's what you do. All right. This is as clinical as it's going to get here. You get an air horn and you stand outside of the house. No, I'm just kidding. But I understand what you mean by being scared for somebody else's safety, because, when I talked to the parole board and, about my own father, and they were talking about, him, getting out after all these years. And I said, is this something that we really want to test out? He hasn't been around women and been in a relationship for, 40, going on 40 years or 30, whatever years it is. And so the last relationship he had, he committed murder. So, I mean, we put him out there. He gets in another relationship. What happens if he doesn't like the way that this woman You know, he doesn't like taking no for an answer. You know, are we gonna?
Right.
Is this a test that we're really gonna do? I remember.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I get what you're saying. It's a really hard situation.
We'll say,
Well, and you know, my
generally,
situation when we were still married, he wanted to go to marriage counseling, which I knew that wasn't going to help our relationship because I wanted out. But in that counseling session, we did group counseling together and individual. Well, the counselor told me what I should do is leave him and don't tell anybody where I went, but leave the kids with him because it's going to be a murder-suicide. She said she could see that happening. Well, I couldn't leave my children with him with her telling me that. So I started saving money, borrowing money, till I was able to afford to leave. I didn't even have a car when I left. I had to borrow somebody's car to leave them. But I did it.
Yeah.
And my kids are safe.
I mean, I think that
it's
you're
amazing.
responsible.
You're a model for other people. It's remarkable. Yeah. Wouldn't you say, Josh? That's amazing.
Yeah, I do. And
it's not easy when,
why do you feel responsible?
you know, when
for
they say
this?
just leave. It's not, I'm sorry.
Why do you
Josh?
feel responsible for him?
I what do you mean? I feel for my ex-husband?
Yeah.
I don't you know, I don't know. I'll have to think that one through. And see, he also sexually violates me. So I was in
I think it's because you're a good person.
that took the rape
I
crisis
think it's
center, and I didn't report
going in
it
and out,
other
Josh.
than to them because I had 3 sons. I didn't want my sons to know that father did something like that. I was more protecting my children. You know, when you say protecting him, am I really doing that?
Are you protecting your? Is your question is are you protecting your children?
I was hoping that I was doing that. Not what motivated me to leave was my children.
Yeah, and I would think that's exactly what you were doing was protecting your children. I don't know how old they are now. Are they all grown up?
Oh yes, they're all grown.
Yeah. And you did your job.
36, 40, and 42. Yes.
You did your job. You kept them safe.
They're wonderful children. Married, have kids.
Yeah.
Right.
And look, I get the feeling responsible. I get that because I feel that same way with my own father, and it terrifies me to think that if he ever gets out and starts dating somebody and does something horrible to them, I don't think, you know, it wouldn't be my fault, but I wouldn't feel great about it. I'll tell you that. I feel terrible, actually.
Okay. Kimberly said something in chat. She said that I think Josh means, why do you feel responsible to warn the new wife? It's really to protect her, not him.
No, I get it. I understand that. But you know, it is, and Dr. Gary's right. It is such a complicated situation because she could just say, you know what, I'm not saying that you are. She could, this is sour grapes, you know, or you guys aren't together anymore,
right?
Blah blah blah, or whatever it is. But I don't know. It's such a complicated situation, and I don't know what you would maybe write an anonymous letter. I don't know.
You know, I once heard. I once heard. Well, I'm not going to give any advice on that situation because I think it's one that's just too personal to answer here. It's not, but I would say that as a general statement, I once heard an expert on trauma speaking, and somebody said, "What is the common sign? What's the common denominator in all people who have been traumatized? Like, what's the surefire sign that somebody has been through trauma?" And by which I think they meant interpersonal trauma, not like volcanoes and earthquakes. In fact, FOA, the great expert on, I think it was FOA, expert on PTSD, pointed out that, and I hope I'm not misquoting her, quoting FOA, that it takes longer to get over PTSD when it's caused by a human than if it's caused by a natural thing like an earthquake or a fire or whatever. And I think it's because if it happens because of a natural thing, you could reason to yourself it's very unlikely to happen again. And if a human does it, it feels like anybody could do that to you. There's humans everywhere, right? It's very, very hard to get over.
Absolutely,
Right.
man. That's 100%.
Right.
I'm telling you, when I was a
Yeah.
kid, and
Well,
after, like, when you finally hear, because at first, I didn't really understand, like, is mom coming back or not? I was little,
right.
so it was the finality of it actually did take some time to sink in, but it sinks in, and it's not a great feeling, but I would go, well, my dad, who's supposed to be the one that protects me and my family, is the one that ripped it apart. And so who can I trust? And I'm telling you, I gave everybody, and I still kind of do, but as I've gotten older, it's not as important to me. But I mean, I would just look everybody over. I was like,
Of
who's
course.
this?
Yeah.
Who's this?
Because they all were human, and
Where do
humans
they come
became. It was
from?
like if you touch the stove and you get burned, you
Right.
generalize it to all stoves.
Yeah, and I said, "What do you want? Why are you here? Why you're?" And I mean, this is a little kid thinking this stuff. You're always like kind of
Yeah.
looking over your shoulder, going, who's that person and why?"
Yeah, it took me a long time to trust them, but I did.
Yeah, it
That's
takes a
right.
long.
No,
It
that's
does. It takes a
wonderful.
really long time.
But but what that expert said that I found so interesting was he said the surefire sign, the common sign in people that have been traumatized interpersonally, is that they always seem to be trying very hard to get somebody to like them in a very bad relationship. In other words, what you're going to see is a person that goes on and on and on, desperately attempting to make someone love them, even though the person is terrible or doesn't care about them or is indifferent or detached. And we see this in people that have been traumatized because it's like it transfers to the it transfers to the new person the desire to have that person give a flying leap or be predictable, and it can just keep moving through multiple people, multiple relationships. You can see it in tiny ways. The person who gets into the argument with somebody in the post office, the mail doesn't, you guys don't take care of me. The government is full of crap, whatever. And you think to yourself, who does the government symbolize? Dad? Some authoritative
Mhm.
figure? Who? And I think that's just it, and I think because you're a good person, that's exactly what makes, somebody who is abusive is drawn to that. They're drawn to that light because they don't have it, that kind of thing. And I think the idea is that that goodness can sometimes be the mechanism to get you to go back. That's the whole thing. It's like you escape the burning house. Like, don't you want to come back and rescue the other people in the burning house? That kind of thing. But the thing is, you're a good person, and remember that at the end of the day, it's the loss of the other person, their loss, and you have flown the coop and realized that it wasn't you. even the question of, was it me? Or is the same thing going to happen to the next person? Suggests an uncertainty about whether it was you. But of course it wasn't. And so it's very, very important to internalize that and to understand. And you see what I'm saying? Because what's going to happen is a person trying to make sense out of it is going to say, maybe the problem is me. When people come, for example, from very nasty homes, they try so hard to make the world predictable because the people that were supposed to love them just randomly hit them or screamed at them or drank or got into fights with each other or did drugs or were abusive or touched them or whatever. Horrible things. And so they do the same thing that primitive people did when they tried to understand how to control the rain or things like that. They come up with something. If I do this, that won't happen. If I do this, that will happen. I'll do a rain dance. 50% of the time it works because it's random, where I'm controlling the rain. So what they do is they come up with this idea. They say, what's the common denominator? What is the thing that if I just do it or don't do it, I'll get loved or I'll be safe? And for whatever reason, the conclusion they tend to come to is, it's me. The problem is that I fundamentally am wrong. It's me. I'm the problem. If I could just not be me, these things wouldn't happen. And once that gets planted in a person, everywhere they go, they feel that way. They think, I'm at a party and no one's talking to me. It's because they could all tell that I'm just junk. I asked this person out and they're not interested in me.
Yeah.
They
Do you
could
wanna
probably
do
see through the makeup. They know I'm junk. You get what I'm saying? But
do you
it's
wanna
not
know
true. What'd
do
you
you
say,
wanna know
John?
how to make you make the what makes the rain dance work, right?
What?
You don't stop dancing until it rains.
Right, it'll eventually work.
It works
Right,
every time.
exactly. Yeah,
Absolutely.
works every time.
Every
But
time.
that's exactly true.
You
So
know,
so so
I
I
just
think go ahead.
shared
I
this
I, I
one
just hope
little
what I'm
incident
saying is helpful.
he did
Yeah.
with me one night. He made me go with him in the car. He held me at night point and put me in the car. And the whole time he's driving, he's telling me what a bad mother I am, housewife, I can't do anything right. It was just over and over and over. And I finally looked at him and I said, why do you want to be with me if I'm all these things? I don't even want to be me anymore.
Yeah.
And I realized all he was doing was beating me down. But I knew I'm not
And
those
I
things.
hope that somebody in the audience heard you, and I mean heard you, because you're 100% correct. Think about it. Why is this person so obsessed with me if I'm so terrible?
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. And as Judge Judy always says, if it doesn't make sense, it isn't true.
Well, what kind of
Well,
a
it
person
isn't.
what
It
kind of a
doesn't
person
make
would want to
sense.
be with such a terrible person?
Exactly. So,
Right.
and the
Yeah.
reality is that, I always say when I meet a person and I'm trying to read them, there are certain questions I tick off in my head. I won't get into them. But one of the questions I think about is, was this person loved? Was this person never loved? Or was this person loved and then they lost it? Everyone that you will ever meet is one of those three. And it's very, very important because if you understand that the person wasn't, they're then in your hand a very vulnerable person. Because if you're the wrong kind of person, you could take advantage of that, especially if you're clever. If you're the right kind of person, you can nurture a person like that, but you could also get addicted to nurturing them and make that all about yourself. You could really mean it, right? If the person has been, they'll probably have a stable attachment style. And then you have to deal with the struggle of letting such a person love you, letting such a person be intimate with you, because they force you to be intimate with yourself. And most of us don't want to be at all. And then, of course, there are the people that had love and it died. And they're never the same because a taste of honey is worse than none at all. It's like that scene in Men in Black when Jack, I think that's his name, Tommy Lee Jones, he gave up everything, and he's watching his wife do the gardening on the satellite, and she doesn't know that he's still out there. And Will Smith says to him, "It's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all." And Tommy Lee Jones says, "Try it."
Did you just quote Men in Black 3?
I love Men in Black. Don't joke. It's about outsiders,
No,
and of
it's
course,
the third
and things
one.
with
Nobody
secret
quotes the
hidden
third.
meanings. I quoted Men in Black 1. Thank you very much.
Well,
But-
gentlemen,
but-
I'm going to
but-
leave it
3,
for
wasn't it?
tonight. Thank you
Yes.
so much.
But
for
thank you
listening
for
to
this
me.
beautiful call. Beautiful call. I hate to say it, but your story is like a blueprint that is being played out by people everywhere, over and over and over. And for you to come here and testify to people that sometimes the story ends that you get out is beautiful. And I give you
Thank you.
all the
Thank
credit
you,
in the
Dr.
world.
Gary. I appreciate that.
Yes, and I can see the beauty of of who you are as a person. I can understand, that all of this stuff has given you a kind of a special perspective. Came at a great cost. So I really appreciate the
I
call.
want
I
to
really
say
do.
the bad things that happen to you and the good things that happen to you make you who you are today.
Of course.
I wouldn't change anything, actually.
It's not.
It made me
The,
stronger.
the actor Lon Chaney Sr. was asked once about his life by somebody who wanted to write a biography. And he said, "All there is to life is a little laugh and a little tear." And that was it. That was the whole interview, as far as and you know what? He was right. It's all there is.
That's right.
So
Y'all
I
have a good night,
appreciate that
guys.
Thank you so much.
for the
Thank
call.
you.
Thank you.
That was a nice
Well,
one.
that was a beautiful call, Josh. But you see why I love the call-ins?
Yeah, we get just a variety
Our
of
ministry. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And a lot of people been in a lot of complicated situations, and it's very it's troubling
Yeah.
because
I know.
you want to be able to give them like great advice, but it's just really hard to. It's really, really hard.
You ever see anybody mock these call-in shows? I haven't.
No, I don't think so. I mean,
They
no.
can't. They can't. They're unimpeachable because they come from so good of a place.
Well, look, yeah, I mean, in all honesty, yeah, we're here. I think that I've done call-in shows for a long time, and I stopped for a little while doing them, but I've been doing them for quite some time, and
You're so good at them. You're like Fraser Crane.
you're right, but I think that it's important. I think that people relate to people that have been through traumatic situations, and people want to know like how I get asked all the time, how do you deal, how do you go on, how do you this, how do you that. And the answer is quite simple. Is that I've never felt guilty about creating a life for myself. I just miss the people that aren't here to enjoy it with me. And
Yeah.
I try to honor them. When my mother passed away when I was very young, and then my grandfather, who was my father, who raised me since I was, really little. When he passed away, it was basically like my own father dying, and going through that, and I've lost a best friend, and I've just kind of noticed that the cycle of life, it's not exactly this cut and dry, but like death is a huge part of life. I mean, it's sort of the other half, you know. And I know, like, I know that a lot of people get scared of the thought of death, and um, I'm scared to leave my loved ones. That's what
Right.
scares me. So,
Well, but
but
Josh, the thing is that no matter how philosophical or religious, spiritual, whatever a person is, they still can't deal with those things. It's utterly, utterly human. I mean, having worked in hospitals, I've seen people in the most human moments. The people who were the biggest jerks that ever lived, with the tears rolling down their cheeks when nobody's looking because they think they're about to leave the world, and they didn't get past their crap,
yeah,
the all that stuff. I've seen it all, and I know I have a reputation for always liking to quote things, little lines of poetry, but I happen to love Robert Frost, poet Robert Frost, and he has a line that's perfect for what we're discussing, which is, it says, "Ah, when to the heart of man was it ever less than a treason to go with the drift of things, to yield with a grace to reason, and bow and accept the end of a love or of a season." And that's so true. In other words, your body, your brain, your mind, they're going to rebel against it, but those things are going to happen. Do you remember The Catcher in the Rye? Did you read it in school?
yeah, I did.
You know, the essence of that book is what sets Holden off. Why does Holden leave Pensy Prep and go on his schlep, to back to New York? He can't handle the death of his brother Allie from cancer. And he loves this girl, Jane. He notices that she plays checkers a certain way with her kings held in the back row, and she probably was being abused because she gets a little teardrop one day when her father comes out and yells at her, and he notices. And this kind of jock that Holden is writing a homework assignment for is going out on a date, and he's always boasting about what he does with the women. And it turns out that it's that girl that Holden loves, Jane, and he's horrified. And then to deal with it, he sits down and he thinks of the most stable love he ever had, the love of his brother. And he writes for the idiot's homework assignment all about this catcher mitt that the brother used to wear, and he would write poetry lines all over it. And then he starts thinking about the kid in the grave and the people walking on the grass above it and the snow on it and everything else. And he can't handle it. And the guy comes back and he starts being all boasty about Jane. And Holden hits him, basically beats the crap out of him. And he leaves and he goes on this adventure where he's walking all around looking for something that doesn't die. He wishes he could preserve innocence because he wishes he could save Allie. And of course, even the name Holden Caulfield is a play on words because it comes from the idea of that he wishes he could be the catcher in the rye, that he could hold in cornfield a kid that's about to go over the cliff into death or maturity or whatever. Well, anyway, how does it all resolve? It resolves because he's sitting in Central Park and he sees the carousel, his sister Phoebe on the carousel, and he understands suddenly that in the Western world, because remember, Salinger was very Buddhist. In the Western world, we think of everything as a straight line. You're young, and the line moves forward, and then you're old, and then you die, and then what? But in the Eastern philosophy, it's a cycle. It's a circular way of thinking. And so looking at the carousel, he realizes Phoebe's going around and around in the rain, another cycle, around and around in the rain. And she's going forward, but she's also coming back to where she was before.
Yeah.
Just going around and around and around. And he cries, and then he winds up in an institution for a little while, and he's fine. And then he's telling the madman, he calls it madman stuff, story of what happened to him. So the essence of that story is that you have to come to the realization that everything is a cycle, that the notion of endings is a construct, a Western idea. But the truth is that things are cyclical, and even science tells us that. You and I are made out of
Matter.
stars that blew up. Yeah, we literally are made out of blown up stars.
Well, was it Ruth who's in the Bible that said, from dust I came and to dust I shall return?
Well, isn't it true, Josh? And
It is. I
but,
mean,
but you
that's
know
actually
what?
it's one of my favorite quotes, because I don't think it could be put any clearer, you know.
Well, that's it. But that's why you can't get the idea that life is so big and you have all these responsibilities, you have to do all these amazing things. You just have to love one thing, and that's enough. One thing is enough. A child, a pet, a friend, a neighbor, a homeless person, a school, but some people do it every day as their job. The nurses and the doctors and the fire people and the cops and and then there are people that love in a hyper-focused way a family or one person or whatever. But the point is, it's enough. It's enough. Because you remember the Judgment Day story, when I was hungry, you gave me to eat. When I was thirsty, you gave me to drink. When I was thinking, it doesn't say you did that for hundreds of people. It says you did it for me. One person. One time is enough. And so as far as I'm concerned, every day before I go to bed, believe it or not, I don't usually talk about this, but every day before I go to bed, I say, which of those did I do today? Most of the time, my answer is that I visited the sick because I work with people that deal with all kinds of emotional problems. Sometimes with the friends at work, I think I visited the person in prison. A lot of times I help the poor. I have a great sensitivity to the poor. But the point is, you just have to do it once. Try to do it once a day. And I think if you do that, no matter what your religion, no matter what your philosophy is, you'll realize your life is more enriched. And then, if it's your last day, that's okay. If you did it right, it's enough. You know what I mean? It's enough.
Yeah, I do.
And so you just have to say, did someone love me? Did I love somebody? And if you had that, every day is gravy. Every day is gravy. One of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life was this. I won't get into what movie it is and all the details, but it was essentially the scenario was that a very old man, um, his wife was going to be put away in a nursing home by their children, but the children didn't want to tell the father. They were separated geographically and they wanted to lie to him. And right, exactly. And the idea is that when this other old man listens to him telling that story and being naive and not realizing that his wife is about to go into a nursing home, the man leaves and he runs into the other room to find his wife. And he says, Sarah, Sarah, where are you? Where are you? And she says, what? 60 years we've been together. Why are you calling after me like we just met? And he says, I just wanted to make sure you were here.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you have the realization that somebody who loves you is around and it really hits you, you want to run in the other room and say, I just want to make sure you're here because you live in fear that they might leave or you might lose them. And that's what you're talking about, isn't it? Because you have lost, you do know what it feels like when you lose. You
I
do.
do. Yeah, I certainly do. And it's a lesson that was learned at a really young age, but it wasn't natural, it just wasn't like a natural thing. And it was so it was, I don't even know how to explain it even all these years later, but um I kind of liken it to, like a mill pond when you take a little pebble and you just throw a pebble in a mill pond, and like all the disturbance at the very center of it, and then the ripples just, even though the ripples as they get bigger aren't, further out, it's the years basically, they're still there. The repercussions of what happened
Oh, yeah.
linger on to this day. I mean, and that goes kind of for everybody, but I think that the scars that we show, it's like you ever see like a lion just walking around in the wilderness and they have all these scars on them, and all these wounds that have healed, uh and they legitimately spend their entire lives fighting, battling to survive. And we do too, in a different way. Like, this is obviously a, hyperbole or whatever you want to call it, but it's you wear those scars as kind of a reminder of sort of where you came from and who you are, and what brought you to the points that you're at. And
Mm.
that's why I feel personally um, responsible for a lot of the things that have gone wrong in my life, my family's life, even though I had nothing. I couldn't have done anything about it, but that doesn't stop me from going. I wish that I could have, and feeling bad about it, you know.
Well, the fact is that all the best parts of her stay alive in you. And I have no doubt in my mind that your mother, who sees you, is proud of you every day.
Yeah, what you said earlier when you were talking about Matthew. I think it's chapter 25. I think it's. But when you were talking about when you were saying, for I was hungry and you gave me food,
Yeah.
and was thirsty and you gave me drink, and as a stranger you let me in.
Mhm.
Um, I don't think that there's more. I don't think that there's anything more beautiful than that. The needy. If you can provide something to anybody, if I can provide anybody with any advice, any inspiration, anything, and I don't find myself as some inspirational person. I don't think that I'm this beacon of hope or anything like that. But what I do know is that I've been through more than most people in the first 20 years of my life, than most people that live to 90. And
Yes.
and so I understand the human condition. I understand humans very well. And I can piece you up really quick, just by meeting you and talking to you and knowing what you're about. It
Yeah.
doesn't take me long. And I think that was a gift and a curse. But I've also found some really pure hearted people that are much better people than will ever be. And I try to be a better person every day. I I go backwards a lot, but I try. I really do.
But it touches people, Josh. It really does. When Mother Teresa, who's a saint now, been canonized, Mother Teresa of Calcutta would pick the poor up They were mostly people who were atheists or Hindu, things like that. And she would pick them up. They were covered in sores and lice and everything else. And
Right.
she would say to them, "Do you believe in Jesus?" And the person would say, "Who is he? Is he like you?" And she would say, "No, but I try to be like him." Well, it's kind of like that.
Right.
You have to pause sometimes and realize that you, in some way, most of us, whether we realize it or not, unless we're absolutely wretched human beings, each of us is like a mini recapitulation of that story of Christ's life. And every one of us has a little Christ in us, a little shard of him. That's why there's the idea that we all come together into the one body, because we can't all be the same parts. We're all little different aspects. And each of us is going to be born into a world that doesn't understand us and doesn't care, where some people love us and some people hate us and some people abuse us. And then there will be a moment where we have to do something greater than ourselves. We're going to suffer and go through some terrible pain and then have our Easter. And if you go through that little redemption story, you're just like everybody else. Every one of us does. And that's why you can't really judge people, because you don't know where they are on that path. You don't know where they are. But what we'll be judged on is, how much did you help all the other people that were on that path? And that's why I like to do these things, come on these shows and so forth. And, if you want to know where somebody's heart is, you have to look at what they're actually doing, not what they're saying. Like, you get a bum rap, Josh, because these other people, you get into these feuds with them and they say stupid things about you, whatever.
I
But if they
thrive in
actually looked
chaos.
at what you did, look at what you actually do, and they'll understand your heart, you know?
Well, you know what?
Mm.
I am harder on myself,
Yeah,
and I say worse things about myself than anybody could ever say about me. And
that's why you
I
do
know
it.
that's what's that?
That's why you do it, so you can beat them to the punch.
Well, not really, because I think the reason that it's that way is, and the people that you're, kind of referring to, like, I could care less about those people. They don't define me. My purpose has been around a lot longer than their opinion has, and it'll be that way long after I never hear from them again. But I liked I really do like to mix it up with
I know.
ignorant self, pointing people that think that they are just, when I can see them for what they are easily. It bothers me that they're not these transparent people, that they're just fakes. They're phonies. I can't stand
Yes,
that.
but Josh, remember what I said to you earlier? Remember, the surefire sign that somebody has been through a traumatic thing is that they get entangled with difficult people. Difficult people that you have negative feelings about. Instead of just saying, let me stay away from people that make me feel certain, you run into it. See?
Yeah.
And I'm just saying, that's the surefire sign. And you're very open about that. So, and I appreciate that about you. But
Look,
I'm
like I
just
said,
saying, that be good to yourself, Josh.
yeah, I
Don't
mean,
do the
when you
work
talk,
of people who want to be mean to you for them.
well, it's funny because when you said, like, earlier, when you were talking about how y- you're misunderstood, or some people
You are.
misunderstand you, huh?
You are.
Well,
I
I'm
like that.
misunderstood.
That's one of the
I'm
things I like about you.
misunderstood by people I'm misunderstood by people that I don't care if they understand me or not. And if they
Of
wanted
course.
to, understand me, then they could. I am not some, I am, I'm not some holy roll or somebody who feels that they're a better person than others. I think that I have a talent. I think that my talent has to do with, broadcasting, with
Mhm.
podcasting, with producing, with all those things. I think that I have that talent. And I sit there
And
back
you're a
and I
good and you're
watch
a good
people.
father. And you're a good father.
I
That's a
try. I
talent too.
try. I really do try to be. But I sit back and I just watch people abuse audiences and abuse and give horrible advice. And I can't stand it. It drives me nuts. I hate phony people. I won't even say hate. I just can't stand them, you know,
Yeah.
and to my detriment because I'll mix it up with them. I'll just flat out tell you, I don't like you. I've done that many times. It's gotten me into a lot of predicaments that I probably shouldn't have, or awkward situations where I may had to have finished my chicken nuggets outside the restaurant. I mean, that happens
Well, I
sometimes.
have the opposite problem. I am literally the inversion. The issue I have is that people don't realize how rare it is for me to want to connect with them in an intimate way, in any emotionally intimate way. So what happens is if there's a person that I feel I can connect with, that I want to let into the amusement park of, what's inside my head, which I usually
Yeah.
don't give anyone admission to,
Right.
what happens is that person doesn't understand that it's unusual that I'm reaching, for the company. And so that it's the opposite issue. It's the thing of that I struggle with the idea of that the kind of people that I feel I can resonate with don't understand that I have picked them out of a crowd and feel, wow, I could really connect with this person, right? And so that for my life has been pocked by instances of that, or people misunderstanding, or you think you could connect with them and they turn out to be fool's gold. There is that kind of person.
Yeah.
And that's very hard. But that's what I was trying to say is like even the fact that I do this show is because I resonate with you. I can feel something about you that we have in common, even though superficially we couldn't be more different. And yet the essence is a kind of otherness, an otherness that I appreciate about you. So, but when I try to connect with people, it's very unusual, and
Well,
or I find them very intense, overwhelming too quickly, or they want things that can't happen, that kind of thing. But
well,
and
like
it,
what I
and
appreciate,
not many.
about you, other than
Oh
your
boy,
wealth of knowledge and that and that people love to hear your advice because you do have excellent advice, and I've even sought out your advice before. I haven't always taken it, but it's not that
no accounting
that
for
it's not.
taste.
Yeah, that it's not that it's not appreciated, but uh, you're about as authentic as they come, and to me,
I try, although people may not know that. They may resent me or think
but I
I'm,
know you.
right,
I mean,
and
we've
they
had
don't.
many
So that's the
conversations. We
point.
spend a lot of time, you know,
Right.
even just talking, either through text or on the phone or whatever. We have a relationship obviously outside of this, and um, you're you're as you're as brutally honest as anybody, and I respect that to the world and back because that's something that I've always strived to is like just tell that person how you feel. Do it in a respectful way. Be nice about it, but there's nothing wrong with telling somebody how you feel. And now if you're
How you
doing
make
it
intimacy. It's how you make intimacy with somebody.
right, right. And like earlier when you asked me, have you ever been do you like, classical music? I could have said to appease people, yeah, it's good. No, I don't like it. Why? I don't know. It doesn't my ears don't resonate with it. I can't tell you why. It's just how I'm wired. But I understand why people like it. I just don't. Not that I hate it.
But you're interested in the fact that I am, and that's what makes you different.
It
But most
actually,
people are
yes.
only interested in the echo chamber of that. I mean, the entire society is, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, the world of 2025 could basically blow it out its diddy bag. As far as I'm concerned, I have lost all patience with it. It is really bad, bad news. But I think that what happens is you find a couple of people, and let's face it, most of us, to quote Little Man Tate, which is a movie I love, are really just looking for somebody to eat lunch with. That's really what it is that you really, most of us just want somebody to sit down with and say, this is who I am. I'm not perfect. I got, this is it. And, this face and this hair and these legs and this, so,
Right.
what I mean? We all pick on ourselves.
Of course.
I ate too much for Thanksgiving, and I put on 5 pounds, that kind of thing. We all do that. But you want somebody who doesn't look at you, but who looks in you. And and the truth is, people stop looking at you after a while. That's why they make such a big deal out of them. But the reality is, you notice them at first, and after a while, if you say, "What did your wife wear today?" You're like, "I don't know," because you're not looking at her anymore. You're looking in her. You don't remember what the people around you wore every day and this, that, and the other thing, and you don't even notice when they age or put on weight or other kinds of things
Right.
or lose weight because you're just looking in them. And it's interesting. I read a study that said that you make so many neuronal connections in your brain when you love a person, so many associations, you're basically addicted to them. It's similar to what happens with a drug addiction. And when a person dies or leaves you, it's estimated that it takes 7 to 10 years for your brain to wipe out those connections. To even
I mean, that
begin
that
to be able
that
to not
doesn't
associate everything. Yeah.
that doesn't
Isn't
surprise
that
me at all. I
and
mean,
I think it takes a lot longer than that.
I think so
But
too.
the idea is that that's just that, to be able to say everything just doesn't remind me of that person anymore. It's like you said about the ripple.
Mhm.
Eventually it quiets, because it has to. The pebble makes ripples, but then the pond is calm again. And so it
Well,
is
it's
very hard,
like you
and
said,
yeah,
everything is a cycle. Eventually, the pond
everything.
calms. Eventually, the pond will calm again, but
That's it.
eventually, it will be disturbed again.
Well, don't let the sure knowledge that everything ends keep you from enjoying it.
Right. Right.
The,
Of
the,
course.
the the worst thing about life and the best thing about life is exactly the same, which is that everything is temporary. Everything you love will eventually be lost, but so will every terrible thing. Nothing is permanent. That is both the most horrifying and most consoling reality in the world. Everything eventually. Remember Lincoln's favorite famous story about the man, the king who wanted the answer to the question that would be true at all times to anything that was ever asked of him, and that the wise men came up with the statement, "And this too shall pass away." That's true of everything. No matter what you said to the king, if you gave that advice, he was right. That's the truth. And that reality, realizing that you can't be afraid to love because you think it's going to end or you're going to get hurt or whatever, because the pain you're going to feel is the cost of the joy you have now. That's the ticket to the show. See?
Ruggs says, I don't
That's
understand
the
any of the
cost.
human interaction. Yeah. I mean,
And I love it. Rug, I agree with you. I feel exactly the same way. Sometimes I feel like I've moved up one step of the staircase of understanding it, and then I realize I'm like 20 steps behind everybody else. It's like chutes and ladders. I fall down, all the steps at once, whatever. It's so true. And the secret is that everybody feels like that.
it's
Everybody
just
sits
whether,
around when nobody's looking and
it's one of
feels
those
that
things
way.
like,
Oh,
everybody's
cool.
self-conscious. Everybody's self-conscious, but
I know.
not everybody
You
admits
see
it.
those Instagram people that look like their lives are fabulous?
Oh,
You know what
it's
they're
just
really
it's all,
thinking?
yeah, of course.
Those airbrushed photos and those stupid, make you think that every day is spent under a palm tree with a photographer. You know what I saw recently? You can't make this stuff up. I saw somebody who took one of those glamour shots, with their arm behind their head or whatever, in front of the gates of Auschwitz and put it
Mm.
on social media. Think about that. Think about that. Can you imagine visiting that place and all you think to do is stand along the train track that goes into that mouth, that terrible devil's mouth that you passed through when you went into that place, and your thought is to take a photo of yourself, and people are saying they saw it. Horrifying. I mean, this is horrifying. But the reality is that's all fake. It's all fake.
Yeah.
I don't believe it for 1 minute. I never believe it for 1 minute. You know what it costs to live that kind of life? The eating disorders, the need to be that way all the time, and what you have to put yourself through, the hours in the gym, the enjoying nothing in life that you want to enjoy, the air, brushing, the photoshopping, the financial expense, the purchased followers, the needing to sexualize yourself all the time, you know what I mean? To boast about, your sexual exploits or
Oh my
make an
god. I mean,
OnlyFans or whatever. It's so
it's
sad.
it is
Ugh.
it's like a life filter is what it is. People do that
It's
because
sad.
they don't yeah, it's sad they don't feel they feel that they're looking to feel superior in any way, and if it's not intellectually, then they attack people's looks, and then they go, but look at me, I look this way. when but at night, before everybody goes to bed and you turn the lights out, everybody's alone in their own thoughts. And if you were able to listen to
Oh,
somebody's thoughts, I mean, it doesn't matter how famous or successful or anything like that. Everybody, and I mean everybody, has those crippling moments.
but people who are blessed, at least temporarily, with, these looks, that make them an influencer, and most of that is fake. But those people, in a way, they're as cursed as people who aren't, who are the opposite direction, because the
Right.
world can only relate to them as a physical object. Remember, I tell the story in The New Evil about Dorothy Stratton, the Playboy Playmate of the Year and movie actress, who was in a relationship with a very abusive man, Paul Snyder, who ultimately killed her horribly. I mean, I'm not going to get into the details because it's disgusting. And he was obsessed with her, but she was having an affair with the director Peter Bogdanovich. Peter Bogdanovich, made a lot of wonderful movies. And one day they were in a bookstore, and he noticed, here she is, the woman who's the in her day was the equivalent of an influencer on Instagram. Everyone
Right.
wanted to look like her, kind of a thing. And she was off in the corner reading a book, and he goes over and looks at it, and it turns out she's reading about the Elephant Man, Joseph Merrick, the extremely deformed Victorian man that was in the circus, abused
Mhm.
in the circus until the London hospital took him and tried to help him, and Dr. Treves took him in, and he was like, "Why are you reading that?" And she explained to him that she could identify with him because the whole world basically just saw her as a physical entity, whether it's extreme beauty or extreme hideousness. And of course, she was killed because of the obsession that this man had with her.
Yeah.
And so the idea is there is something to be said for being related to as a full person. And I'll tell you, I got to tell you from personal experience that if you're kind to a person consistently and you care about them, they could fall in love with you. Doesn't matter what people look like. Because at some point, the person goes, "You keep getting all dolled up, all whatever." And I go out and I look for people, and all I get are jerks, you know. And at some point, there's this kind of stable figure that cares and is kind, and you start to love them. And that's true of men and women, I find. I hear it all the time in therapy.
So
You
what you're
start to
saying
fall in
is,
love with it.
so you think that love is blind?
I think what happens is that after the initial animal reaction to a person, the more you look at them, the more strangely symmetrical they become in your mind because you're familiar with them. And then there's no other face in the world that you could love. It doesn't matter how funny looking a person is or whatever, because you start looking at the person and you start thinking, there's no one in the world that when I wake up in the morning, I turn and I want them to be there. And when I come home from work, I want to tell them what happened. And before I go to bed, I want to tell them what happened. And they understand me without my telling them anything. Because you realize that that person is so rare that it doesn't matter what egg they're in, what shell they're in. It's irrelevant. Once you let a person in, yeah, absolutely. They you could
Yeah,
fall in
because
love with
I
them.
think
And I think
I
that's
don't
what people are avoiding.
I don't necessarily know if love is. I wouldn't say love is blind. I think it squints for sure, but
Well,
uh,
the initial attraction is the initial
of
attraction. I mean,
course,
you think somebody's
but
good looking
like
or you
there's not
don't, but,
right. But
you know,
you look at somebody and you go, they have kind eyes. I mean, it could be as simple as that.
don't you love kind eyes?
Yeah, I do actually, and you know who I always thought had really kind eyes. It was I know this is weird. Was Robin Williams.
Oh, his eyes were so sad. He looked like a
Yeah,
he had those eyes like a basset hound with those
there
big
was
yeah.
there was love in there. There was you could see that there was kindness, that there was pain, but there was just something about his eyes. You could just see. He was like he always played the sad clown. You know,
He was
and
emotionally troubled, I think, yeah.
well, it's like when you're the one that makes everybody else laugh, who makes you?
Well, I think that's why he committed suicide because I think his feeling was, now I'm gonna get sick and I feel like I'm gonna be a burden, and I feel like my role in life is to bring people joy, not to be a burden, because that's how he felt. And, the it's very hard because he would have brought people joy anyway,
He
because it
did.
was his soul that brought people joy, not
I
his
met him.
antics.
I
Oh,
met him
that
at San Francisco Children's Hospital when my sister was being
he
treated,
was
and
volunteering. He did a
yeah,
lot of that.
he was going room to room, and he wasn't dressed up that day, but somebody had told me that he had been there earlier in the week, and that he did dress up like a clown and tie balloons for kids and stuff like that. And when I met him, um, he was just he's one of those people like everybody says, well, he had sad eyes, and then we know the tragic ending and all that stuff. We know all the tragic ending. I'm telling you, he lit up an entire hospital when he showed up.
Yeah.
Everybody was excited that Robin's coming today. As Robin's coming today, and we were just down there. For my sister, she had really bad scoliosis, and um,
Oh,
he I didn't. He came in. I didn't think he was going to come into her. He came into her room. I couldn't believe it. I was sitting right there. I was like, "Oh my God, that's Robin Williams."
yeah,
And I was pretty young, but I'd seen Mrs. Doubtfire and
yeah.
Aladdin and stuff, and he was
I mean,
just
and how many people loved him? And do you think they loved him because he was a stud muffin or something?
no,
They loved
no.
him because his heart was beautiful. And that's what I'm trying to say. I just think
Well, he was eternally
slow and steady wins
miserable,
the race.
but
Yeah.
he was eternally miserable. But he knew that his gift was that he could put smiles on the faces of people because he had a gift and he used that gift, even though when he would go home at night, you wouldn't even want to be inside the man's head because it would be too terrifying. But I'm telling you, he lit up an entire hospital.
Absolutely. Do you think there's anything more attractive than somebody who's funny? It's really attractive. A
Yeah,
person that can go into a room and just work them.
Sure.
You love them, you know. It's a kind of attractive because it shows an incredible amount of sensitivity to be able to feel what's going to make people laugh. And because funniness is about being in on the truth. You know the secret truth that nobody else does, right? So
Yeah.
comedians and saints are so similar, right? And they're in on it. They're in on the joke. They're in on everything. And
Well,
so people like that, they let you in. They put their arm around you and they pull you in and they say, come on, we all know the
a-
truth.
and
And then you
that
can air it.
town,
Yeah.
the San Francisco, there's murals of him everywhere. That town loved Robin Williams to this day. I mean, that was his town.
Yeah.
People were
He would have been
just
very pained to live in 2025. There are things going on that would have broken his heart. And and believe me, there are things that would have broken his heart. I got to see him at Comic Relief, the thing he did for the
yeah,
homeless. I saw him on stage, and then there was an after party and everything. And I always felt about him from when I saw him I felt that he was sort of like an inflated character. In other words, that he believed sometimes that he was the character he played
yep,
in front of
yeah,
other socially. But in the privacy of his heart, I think he probably was a very pained human being.
very,
And but the point of this road we're going down is the idea that when you're looking at this goofy, social media influencer, nonsense world we're living in, you have to remember that the reason people are stressing those silly temporary things so much is because they're empty. There's nothing else to be the eternal for them. So what's left? Fleeting things. How many people they've hooked up with, or how many people like them or follow them, which is the most disturbing of all the words that people
yeah,
use. It's really
right.
dumb. But this is the result of emptiness. I think empty is the word I would use for contemporary life. And if you find somebody in this world that shares your values and you know, their heart kind of chimes to the same things and is broken by the same things. Hold fast to them because you're only going to get a couple of them, especially if you're a certain personality type. Like if you ever take a Myers-Briggs, some of the personality types are so rare. They're like 1, 2, or 3% of the population. People like that, you know how hard it is for them to find someone? You know what I mean? That they have to like go out in the world and like talk to hundreds of people to find somebody. Other people, they're like the universal donor and a universal recipient when it comes to blood. Everyone likes them.
Sure.
But for some people, it's not so easy. And do you think that kind of a person is going to care what form the person comes in who happens to be the one who makes them feel they're not alone? They don't care. Nonsense. So, and I think that's what those people are really after. And every once in a while, I'm heartbroken because I'll lean in close with a person like that and I'll say, I bet underneath all of this, you're really lonely. And they'll say, no, I'm not. Last year I made $500,000 on OnlyFans. And now I've just bought myself a brand new car and a whole other thing. And then you think to yourself, okay, I'm going to try to take this deeper. And then you point out the emptiness of that. And they're like, actually, I think it's a lot of fun. And then you're like, okay, there are some people that really are that empty. It's heartbreaking, but you know what? So I can't make a generalization, but I think some people feel the emptiness. Don't you feel it when you think about 2025? That even the people that you're supposed to respect the most, the people that you're supposed to look up to as examples, are totally bankrupt morally. I mean, doesn't it horrify you? Like bankrupt, masquerading as being values. I mean, doesn't it break your heart? Look.
Yeah, man, I've been let down a lot by a lot of things and people, and there's very few people I look up to because of things like that. And
well, people look up to you. That's the key. Be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And no,
I've let a lot of people.
We are not directly talking about politics. What would you say?
I've let a lot of people down in my life too.
So is everybody.
I
It
guess
also
so.
picked a lot of people up. And
Well, I
you know,
appreciate
yeah.
I
Go ahead.
appreciate you saying that. And let me just say, Canadian Mama Bear says, "Love you, Josh, Dr. Gary. Always intellectually interesting and extremely entertaining." We're at 3 hours. I got to go
All right.
deal with those
Okay.
dogs. I can hear them.
I hope
like-
Canadian Mama Bear stays Canadian.
Thank you guys.
Maple leaf waving. All right. Well, yes.
Thank you, Dr. Gary.
But I think it was a really interesting conversation, and I think we touched some lives, you know, with some of this. So I think it's
had a blast.
And
Always.
okay, and thank you.
And we need to do our next
when you want
on
the
our
next
serial killer. Yes.
Well, who do people want to hear about?
Well, that's.
You want to give them a little poll?
Well, I can put one up on my. I can put one up on the community page, and they can vote.
Well, I was thinking, to be honest with you, I'm very tempted to talk about Eileen Wuornos, but I wonder what people think about, because she is just unusual. I mean, a female serial killer. I mean, fascinating.
Well,
and
we might as well. I mean, we're going to go through a bunch of them.
Well, we could talk about her. Another one that I'm really, really interested in that people might want to talk about is Randy Kraft. A lot of people don't even know who he is. We could talk about Israel Keys. I know we've gotten the request before.
Sure.
But you know, all those things. So if anybody, you know, has an idea, you know, let us know. But anyway, it is late, and I'm going to go to work in the morning.
Very
and
good.
Thanks for all the kind words. And you're going to put a poll up, and you'll let me know who people want to do.
Yeah, let's put a poll of like 3 up, 3 different, and then eventually I'm sure we'll cover all of them. I think people really enjoy that, and I enjoy talking about them too. But I also like these kind of free form podcasts as well, where we just, you know, they're fun and people show up and they watch and they stay.
And we get great calls. They're always so interesting. We get callers that wax poetically about Emily Dickinson and share about the deepest secrets of their lives, and you know, it's extraordinary. And then the people in the audience, they learn from it, and they're better people because of it, and they're on the edge of their seats. Isn't the audience growing? Is the audience getting bigger each week, or what?
I think so.
Is this like a tell your friends thing, or you know, I mean, do people?
Well, I tell you that, you know, one of the other things that I am proud of is that, you know, we can just do a generic call-in show and people show up. I love that.
Well, yeah. Well, I have an idea for you. I think we should do a kind of raffle or giveaway for a signed copy of the New Eagle. I get so many requests for it. I think maybe we could do something like that, you know, where people, I don't know, they have to answer a trivia question, or they have to be the X number of person to call in or whatever. But I just kind of think, and I have other things that we could do that with. You know, like for example, I have this enormous library, and today I was cataloging books, and I realized I have stacks of doubles, books that I got from Michael Stone that I already owned and things like that. And those are things that could be given in a giveaway too. But you know, really, really good books, some of them out of print, that I think are amazing about violent crime and psychopathology. But I just think you should do something like that, because there are some people who can't really afford it, you know, or they really want it, or they want it signed. Now, obviously, Michael is deceased, so you can't co-sign it anymore. But if the one signature is enough, you know, we can do that. Are you open to that?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, of course. I'm not going to sign your book.
No, I don't mean that. Are you open to a giveaway where?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then you know, I mean, you just tell me where to send it, and I'll
I had somebody ask me to sign somebody's. It was like a book or something one time, and I was like, I'm not going to sign somebody else. I'm not going to sign a book.
Well, because it's like a fundraiser, you know, like people they give, you know, $5 or something, and then they're in the raffle, you know, something like that. But I think people would like it, and I always draw when I sign books, I always do an original doodle with it. I think every one I've ever signed, maybe, except in Barnes and Noble when I did this, I signed stacks of them. I just put a signature and I date them, like where I was and the day. But I usually do a drawing, and people love those. They're kind of each
I
one's
love it.
different. Yeah. So
Yeah,
maybe
no,
people
let's
like
do it.
that. All right.
Joby,
Anyway,
thank you so
okay.
much.
Well, I thought that was really fun. Okay.
I had a great time, Gary. Always.
Okay.
Talk to you soon. Bye. Yeah, we could absolutely do something like that. So that would be great. Thank you again to Dr. Gary for being here. Let's see, anything going out tomorrow? Let me check that. I don't even know at the time. Tomorrow, we finish. What time is it tomorrow? 7 o'clock. Yeah, I might make it a little earlier. I might change it to 6 o'clock tomorrow. And we will be doing the Stacy Wandra final episode. I appreciate you guys being here. Always a good time. Appreciate the support. Thank you for the super stickers and super chats. All right. That's it.